I went to the hospital to take care of my son who had a broken bone. While he was sleeping, the head nurse quietly slipped a piece of paper into my hand. Don't come again. He is lying. Check the camera at 2 a.m. What I saw in that footage left me in shock and started a war I never thought I would have to fight against my own flesh and blood. I am Jeremiah, 69 years old, and for 40 years I built the foundations of this city with my own two hands. I know the difference between a load-bearing wall and a facade. I know when a structure is sound and when it is rotting from the inside out. But I never realized the rot was inside my own family until the night my phone rang at 3 in the morning. Before I tell you how I tore their world apart brick by brick, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted the wrong person. The smell of antiseptic hit me the moment the automatic doors slid open at St. Jude's Medical Center. It is a smell. I hate the smell of bad news. I ran toward the emergency room, my heavy work boots squeaking against the polished linoleum floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from age, but from the terrifying panic of a father who thinks he is about to lose his child. Room 304 was chaotic. My son Terrence was lying on the bed, his right leg elevated and encased in a thick white plaster cast. He was moaning a low, guttural sound of agony that twisted my stomach into knots. Standing next to him was Megan, his wife. Her blonde hair was disheveled, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks, her face flushed red. When she saw me, her expression didn't soften. It hardened into a mask of pure accusation. "You did this!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. "This is all your fault, Jeremiah." I froze in the doorway, clutching my old canvas cap in my hands. "What happened?" I asked, my voice raspy from the drive. "Is he okay?" "Look at him. Does he look okay to you?" Megan yelled, her voice shrill enough to make a passing nurse wince. "He fell down those stairs, those rotting, ancient, dangerous stairs in your house. I told you years ago to fix them. I told you they were a death trap. But you are too cheap to spend a dime, aren't you? And now look. Terrence could be crippled for life because you are too stubborn to maintain your own property." Her words were like nails being driven into my skull. I looked at Terrence. He had his eyes squeezed shut, sweat beading on his forehead. "Dad," he groaned, his voice thick with pain. "It hurts so bad. I think I heard it snap. I just slipped. The wood just gave way." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, heavy and suffocating. But beneath the guilt, a tiny logical part of my brain flickered. I am a master contractor. I built that staircase myself 30 years ago. I used reinforced white oak, seasoned and sealed. I checked those steps last week when I was cleaning. There was no rot. There was no give. But looking at my son, writhing in pain, logic disappeared. I was just a father who had failed to protect his boy. "I am so sorry, son," I whispered, stepping closer to the bed. "I will fix it. I promise. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you don't care," Megan hissed, stepping between me and the bed like a guard dog. "You live in that big old house all alone, hoarding your pension while we struggle. And now your negligence has put my husband in the hospital. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost?" She didn't give me time to answer. She pulled a clipboard from the end of the bed and shoved it toward me. The insurance rejected the claim, she said, her eyes narrowing. "They said it was a pre-existing condition or some nonsense. They won't cover the emergency admission fee. We need $5,000. Right now. Or they are going to stop giving him pain medication. $5,000, I repeated. Just for admission." "Don't look at me like that, Jeremiah," Megan snapped. "Do you want your son to suffer? Do you want him screaming in agony because you want to keep your money in your mattress? Pay it. It is the least you can do after breaking his leg." I looked at Terrence. He opened one eye, looking at me with a desperate, pleading expression. "Dad, please," he whispered. "Just help us." I nodded slowly. I reached into the inside pocket of my faded denim jacket. It was a jacket I had worn for 10 years, stained with oil and paint. To Megan and Terrence, it looked like the uniform of a man who was barely scraping by. They didn't know about the 15 apartment complexes I owned across the state. They didn't know about the construction firm I had sold 5 years ago but still consulted for. They saw a tired old black man in work clothes. I pulled out my wallet. It was beat up on the outside, scuffed and worn. But it was hand-stitched Italian leather, a gift from a business partner in Milan. I opened it and saw the stack of $100 bills I always carried for emergencies. I pulled out 50 bills. $5,000. Megan's eyes locked onto the cash. For a second, the grief and anger vanished, replaced by a hungry, predatory glint. She snatched the money from my hand before I could even offer it. Finally, she huffed, shoving the cash into her designer purse. At least you are good for something. I have to go find the billing department. Don't touch him. You have done enough damage. She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. I stood by the bed looking down at my son. I reached out to touch his shoulder to offer some comfort, but he flinched away from me. I need to sleep, Dad, Terrence mumbled, turning his head away. Just let me sleep. I pulled a plastic chair into the corner of the room and sat down. I felt small. I felt useless. My son was broken. My daughter-in-law hated me, and I was apparently the cause of it all. I sat there for an hour watching the rhythmic rise and fall of Terrence's chest, listening to the beep of the monitor. The room was quiet save for the hum of the machines. I was lost in my own thoughts, wondering if I should just sell the house like Megan always wanted. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a stubborn old man, holding on to a past that was dangerous to the people I loved. Then the door opened softly. It wasn't Megan. It was the head nurse. Her name badge read LaToya. She was a tall woman, maybe in her 50s, with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that looked like they had seen everything this world had to offer. She moved with a silent, efficient grace. She checked Terrence's IV bag, adjusted the drip, and noted something on the chart. She didn't look at Terrence. She looked at me. Her gaze was intense, piercing. It wasn't the look of a nurse checking on a visitor. It was the look of someone trying to communicate without speaking. She walked over to where I was sitting. I started to stand up, thinking she needed me to move. Sit down. Mr. Banks, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She stood between me and the bed, blocking Terrence's view if he happened to open his eyes. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She took my hand, her grip firm and warm, and pressed the paper into my palm. Close your hand, she murmured. I frowned, confused. What is this? Don't read it here, she hissed, her eyes darting to the door, and don't look at your son. Listen to me very carefully. You are a good man. I can see it. You don't deserve this. I don't understand, I whispered back. You will, she said. She let go of my hand and stepped back, her face returning to a mask of professional neutrality. Just do what the note says. And for God's sake, keep your money in your pocket next time. She turned and walked out of the room before I could ask another question. I sat there, the paper burning a hole in my palm. My heart was racing again, but this time it wasn't from guilt. It was from a sudden, sharp instinct that told me something was very, very wrong. I waited 5 minutes. I checked to make sure Terrence was still asleep. His breathing was deep and even. I slowly unfolded the paper in my lap, shielding it from the door. The handwriting was hurried, scrawled in blue ink. Do not come back tomorrow. He is lying. Check the camera in the room. I turned it on at 2 a.m. I read it twice. He is lying. I looked at the cast on Terrence's leg. It looked real. The doctors had been in here. The x-rays must have been real. How could he be lying about a broken bone? But Nurse LaToya had no reason to lie to me. She was a stranger. Why would she risk her job to pass a note to an old man she didn't know, unless she saw something? I stood up. I couldn't stay in this room another second. The air felt thick, suffocating. I needed to think. I needed to see. I grabbed my jacket and quietly walked out of the room. I didn't say goodbye to Terrence. I didn't wait for Megan to come back with her receipt that I knew I would never see. I walked straight to the elevator and went down to the parking garage. I climbed into my truck. It is a 1995 Ford, rusted around the wheel wells, paint fading from blue to gray. But under the hood, it has a custom engine worth $50,000. It is a beast disguised as a wreck, just like me. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out my laptop. It is a high-end military-grade machine, another remnant of my past life that my family knows nothing about. I am not just a builder. I am the man who built St. Jude's Medical Center 20 years ago. I laid the foundation. I installed the wiring. And I personally oversaw the installation of the security system. I kept a backdoor administrative access key for maintenance purposes, a key I never thought I would use until tonight. I opened the laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark cab of the truck. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I bypassed the firewall in seconds. I found the server for the internal patient monitoring system, room 304. I selected the timestamp, 020 a.m. My finger hovered over the enter key. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to see this. I wanted to believe my son was a victim. I wanted to believe the accident was real. but the note in my pocket felt heavy like a stone. I pressed enter. The video feed loaded. It was black and white, grainy night vision, but clear enough. Terrence was in the bed, but he wasn't sleeping, and he wasn't in pain. He was sitting up cross-legged. The leg with the cast was bent at the knee, completely flexible. He was eating a slice of pizza with one hand and holding a beer can with the other. He was laughing. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. A broken femur doesn't bend. A man in agony doesn't eat pepperoni pizza and laugh. Then the door opened on the screen. It was Megan. She wasn't crying. She wasn't the distraught wife I had seen an hour ago. She walked in carrying a bag from a fast food joint. She tossed it onto the bed. "Did you call the old man?" she asked. The audio was crisp. I had installed high-quality microphones in these rooms myself. "Yeah," Terrence said, his mouth full of food. I left a voicemail crying about the pain. I told him the stairs finally gave out. "He is going to feel so guilty he will sign anything." "Good," Megan said. She sat on the edge of the bed. She reached into her bag and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. It was a heavy wooden rolling pin. "Is it swollen enough?" she asked, looking at his leg. "Not really," Terrence said. "The cast covers most of it, but the doctor said if there isn't visible trauma around the knee, the insurance fraud claim might not stick. And we need the old man to see bruises. He needs to think he crippled me." Megan nodded. She stood up. She gripped the rolling pin with both hands. "Okay, hold still," she said. Terrence braced himself against the headboard. "Do it." Megan swung the rolling pin. She didn't hold back. She slammed the wood hard into the soft flesh of Terrence's thigh just above the cast. Terrence screamed, but it was a muffled, stifled scream. He bit into his pillow. Megan hit him again and again. Thud, thud. I watched in horror as purple welts began to rise on my son's skin almost instantly. "That should do it," Megan said, breathing hard. She tossed the rolling pin into her bag. "Now when he comes tomorrow, you show him that. You tell him the bone shattered and cut the muscle. You tell him he needs to sell that worthless plot of land in the countryside to pay for the reconstructive surgery." "It hurts like hell," Terrence hissed, rubbing his leg. "It is worth it," Megan said, kissing him on the forehead. "That land is the only asset he has left that we can liquidate quickly. Once we get the $40,000 for the surgery, we can pay off the credit cards." $40,000. They were doing this for $40,000. They were beating themselves black and blue, lying to my face and blaming me all for a piece of land they thought was worth pennies. I closed the laptop. The sound of the lid snapping shut echoed in the truck like a gunshot. They thought the land was worthless scrub. They thought I was a broke old man with nothing but a dangerous house and a small pension. They were wrong. That land in the countryside wasn't just dirt. It was sitting directly in the path of the new interstate highway expansion. I had known about the city planning for 5 years. I had held on to it. That land wasn't worth $40,000. It was worth $2 million, and they were willing to break their own bones to trick me out of it. I started the engine of my truck. The V8 roared to life, a deep, angry growl that matched the feeling in my chest. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going to war. I drove out of the parking garage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They wanted a villain. They wanted a helpless old man they could manipulate and rob. Well, tomorrow morning I would go back to that hospital. I would bring them soup. I would cry. I would apologize. I would play the part of the fool they thought I was. And while they were celebrating their victory, I would be digging their graves. I checked my rearview mirror as the hospital lights faded into the distance. "Check the camera," the nurse had said. I checked it. And now I was going to make sure they wished the camera was the only thing watching them. The game had just begun. The heavy door of my 1995 Ford truck groaned as I pulled it shut, sealing me inside the cold, dark cab. The smell of old oil, stale coffee, and decades of hard work filled the small space, a scent that usually brought me comfort, but tonight only made me feel nauseous. I sat there for a moment in the silence of the hospital parking garage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. To the world outside this truck, I was just Jeremiah Banks, a washed-up retired laborer in a stained denim jacket who probably scraped by on Social Security checks. That was the image I had carefully curated for years. It was a suit of armor made of irrelevance. If people think you have nothing, they don't try to take anything from you. Or so I thought. I reached under the passenger seat, my fingers brushing against the cold metal casing of my laptop. It was not a device you could buy at a local electronics store. It was a high-performance machine with military-grade encryption, a remnant of the days when I wasn't just laying bricks, but managing multi-million-dollar infrastructure contracts. My son and his wife looked at my rough hands and assumed I didn't know how to use anything more complex than a hammer. They didn't know that I had personally designed the network architecture for half the commercial buildings in this district, including the very hospital looming above me. I placed the laptop on the center console and booted it up. The screen illuminated the cab with a harsh blue glow, casting long shadows across my face. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a speed and precision that would have shocked Terrence. I didn't need a password to access the guest Wi-Fi. I needed total administrative control. 20 years ago, when my construction firm won the bid to build the new wing of St. Jude's, I insisted on retaining a backdoor access point for remote system maintenance. It was a clause buried deep in the technical addendums of a 1,000-page contract, a clause everyone had forgotten but me. I typed in the sequence of commands that I had memorized 2 decades ago. The screen flashed a command prompt, then a loading bar. Access granted. I was in. I wasn't just looking at a computer screen anymore. I was looking through the eyes of the building itself. I navigated through the server directories, bypassing the standard firewalls like I was walking through an open door. I found the surveillance subsystem and located the feed for room 304. I took a deep breath, the air whistling through my nostrils. My heart was a heavy drum in my chest. The nurse said 2 a.m. I punched in the timestamp. The video file loaded. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy black and white view of my son's hospital room from 4 hours ago. The room was dim, lit only by the ambient glow of the hallway lights seeping under the door. At first, it looked peaceful. Terrence was lying in the bed, his leg propped up in that thick, heavy cast. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting, trying to find the lie the nurse had warned me about. Then Terrence moved. It wasn't the movement of a man in agony. It wasn't the slow, pained shifting of someone with a shattered femur. He sat up abruptly, swinging his torso forward with an athletic ease that shouldn't be possible for someone who had allegedly fallen down a flight of stairs hours earlier. He reached over to the bedside table, but he didn't grab the call button for the nurse. He grabbed a greasy cardboard box. Pizza. I watched in stunned silence as my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man who had just wept, crocodile tears in front of me, opened the box and grabbed a slice of pepperoni pizza. He took a huge bite, chewing vigorously, his head bobbing to some music only he could hear. Then he did something that made bile rise in my throat. He used his cast as a table. He rested a can of beer on the plaster encasing his supposedly broken leg. He drummed his fingers on the cast right over where the break should have been. If his leg was truly broken, the vibration alone would have sent him screaming for morphine. But he just sat there, eating and drinking, looking bored and completely comfortable. He twisted his body, reaching down to scratch an itch inside the cast with a long plastic ruler. He bent his knee. I froze the frame. I stared at the image. The cast was bent at a slight angle because his knee was bent inside it. A rigid cast on a broken leg does not bend. A broken leg does not bend. It was a prop. A fake. A theater performance designed for an audience of 1, and I was the fool in the front row. The disgust I felt wasn't just anger. It was a profound, hollow sickness. He wasn't in pain. He was mocking me. Every moan, every tear, every plea for help had been a calculated performance to extract money from my wallet. I pressed play again. The door to the room opened on the screen. It was Megan. She walked in not with the tear-streaked face of a worried wife, but with the swagger of a co-conspirator. She tossed her purse onto the chair I had sat in earlier. She looked at Terrence and said something. I turned up the volume on my laptop. The audio feed from the room was crystal clear. "Is the old man gone?" Megan asked, her voice devoid of the shrill panic she had used on me. "Yeah," Terrence replied, his mouth full of cheese. "He bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought he was going to cry when I did the whole, 'Oh, God, it hurts' routine." Megan laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Good. Did you get the cash?" Terrence pointed to the bedside table. $5,000. He keeps it in that ratty old wallet like a drug dealer." I watched Megan pick up the stack of bills I had given them. She fanned them out, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. 5,000, she muttered. "It is a start, but it is not enough. We need 40,000 for the surgery lie, and we need him to sell that land." She put the money away and looked at Terrence's leg. She frowned. "It doesn't look bad enough," she said critically. "If he comes back tomorrow with a doctor, or if he asks to see the injury during a dressing change, we are screwed. The skin looks too healthy above the cast. We need bruising. We need it to look like trauma. I watched as she reached into her large tote bag. I expected makeup. I expected her to pull out a kit to paint fake bruises on his skin. Instead, she pulled out a heavy, solid wood rolling pin. My breath caught in my throat. I knew what was coming, but my mind refused to accept it. This was barbarism. This was madness. "Ready?" Megan asked, gripping the handle of the rolling pin like a baseball bat. Terrence winced, shifting on the bed. "Just do it quick," he said. "And try not to hit the bone this time. The last one still throbs. This time." They had done this before. Megan didn't hesitate. She swung the rolling pin with a vicious, practiced force. The wood connected with the fleshy part of Terrence's thigh just above the top of the cast. The sound was a dull, wet thud that echoed through my truck's speakers. Terrence let out a stifled yelp, biting into his fist. His body jerked, but not from a broken bone, from the fresh impact of blunt force trauma. "Another one," Megan said, raising the rolling pin again. "We need it to be purple by morning." She struck him again. Thud, and again. Thud. I watched my daughter-in-law beat my son, and I watched my son let her do it. They were systematically destroying his body to build a narrative of suffering. "Okay, stop, stop," Terrence hissed through gritted teeth, rubbing his thigh. "That is enough. It is swelling up already." Megan lowered the rolling pin, breathing hard, a flush of excitement on her cheeks. "Perfect," she said. "When he sees that tomorrow, he will sign the power of attorney just to stop feeling guilty." "He is weak, Terrence. Your father is a weak, sentimental old fool. He sees a bruise and he opens his wallet." Terrence nodded, examining the red welts rising on his skin. "He is useless," he spat. "Sitting on that land for decades doing nothing with it. He doesn't even know what it is worth. He thinks it is just a dirt patch for a garden. We are doing him a favor, really. We are liquidating assets he is too stupid to use." The sheer malice in their voices was paralyzing. They didn't just want my money. They despised me. They hated me for having what they wanted, and they hated me for being alive to keep it from them. They saw my frugality as stupidity. They saw my kindness as weakness. I sat back in the driver's seat, the light from the laptop screen illuminating the tears that were silently tracking down my face. They weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of clarity. The fog of paternal love that had blinded me for so long had evaporated, burned away by the heat of their cruelty. They wanted the land. They wanted the $2 million that land was worth to the city developers, and they were willing to beat themselves black and blue to get it. They thought they were playing a game against a senile old man. They didn't know they had just declared war on a man who had survived poverty, racism, and the cutthroat construction industry for 40 years. I reached out and closed the laptop. The screen went black, plunging me back into darkness. But I wasn't afraid of the dark. I had lived in it, worked in it, and thrived in it. I started the engine of my truck. The rumble of the motor felt like a beast waking up. I wasn't going home to sleep. I had phone calls to make. I had a lawyer named Kaplan who needed to be woken up. Tomorrow I would go back to that hospital. I would walk into that room with my head bowed and my voice trembling. I would look at the bruises Megan had made. I would listen to Terrence's lies. I would play the part of the victim so well they would never see the blade coming until it was already buried in their greed. The nurse was right. The camera told the truth. And now I was going to use that truth to burn their entire world to the ground. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of room 304, casting long, sharp shadows across the hospital bed. I stood outside the door for a moment, adjusting my grip on the old stainless steel thermos I had carried to construction sites for 30 years. It was filled with chicken soup made from scratch at 4 in the morning while I replayed the footage of my son eating pizza and laughing. Now I had to walk in there and play the role they had written for me. I had to be the confused, guilty, helpless old father. I took a deep breath, hunched my shoulders slightly to lose an inch of height, and pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me was a masterpiece of deception. The pizza boxes were gone, the beer cans had vanished. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender perfume. Terrence was lying flat on his back, his eyes closed, his face a mask of suffering. The sheet was pulled down just enough to reveal his thigh right where Megan had struck him with the rolling pin. The skin was a mottled canvas of angry purples and deep blues. It looked horrific. If I hadn't watched her inflict those wounds with my own eyes, I would have fallen to my knees in grief. Megan was sitting by the bedside holding Terrence's hand with both of hers. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and puffy. She had clearly spent time scrubbing them to look like she had been crying all night. "Oh, Jeremiah," she exhaled, her voice trembling. "Thank God you are here. It has been a nightmare." He was screaming in pain all night. "The morphine isn't touching it." I shuffled into the room, clutching the thermos to my chest like a shield. "I brought soup." I mumbled, my voice low and wavering. "It is his favorite. With the dumplings." Megan looked at the thermos with a flicker of annoyance before smoothing her expression back into one of tragic concern. "That is sweet, Dad." "Really? But he can't eat. He is in too much pain. The doctor was just here." She stood up and walked toward me, guiding me away from the bed as if I were a fragile child. Her grip on my arm was firm, too firm. It was the grip of someone taking control. "What did the doctor say?" I asked, letting my eyes widen with fear. "It is worse than we thought," Megan whispered, glancing back at Terrence. "The fall didn't just break the bone, it shattered the structural integrity of the knee. The ligaments are torn. The doctor said if we don't operate immediately, he will walk with a cane for the rest of his life. He might never work again." I looked at my son. He let out a perfectly timed groan, shifting his leg. The performance was flawless. "Operate," I repeated. "Well, do it. Tell them to do it." Megan sighed, a long, ragged sound. "We can't. The insurance company denied the appeal this morning. They are calling it elective reconstructive surgery because it is technically possible for the bone to heal without it, even if it leaves him crippled. They won't pay a dime." "How much?" I asked. I knew this was coming. I knew the number before she said it. $40,000. Megan said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We need $40,000 to book the operating room and the specialist. And we need it by noon, Jeremiah. If we wait, the swelling will be too bad to operate." I sank into the plastic visitor chair, clutching the thermos. 40,000. "I don't have $40,000 in cash, Megan. You know that. My pension is barely enough for the bills." Megan knelt in front of me. She took my rough, calloused hands in her soft, manicured ones. She looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. It was a look that could melt stone, but my heart had turned to ice at 2 a.m. "I know you don't have cash," she said softly, "but you have assets, Jeremiah. You have things you don't need." "What things?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "The land," she said. The urgency in her voice sharpened. "That 10-acre plot in the countryside, the one you inherited from your grandfather. It is just sitting there, Dad. It is just dirt and weeds. You haven't stepped foot on it in years." I pulled my hands away, shaking my head slowly. "No, not that land. That is family land. That is all I have to leave to Terrence when I pass. It is his inheritance." Megan's face hardened instantly. "Inheritance," she snapped, her voice rising. "What good is an inheritance if he is a cripple, Jeremiah? He needs help now, not when you are dead. That land is useless to us. It is just a tax burden. But we called a real estate agent this morning just to see." "You called an agent?" I asked, letting a note of shock enter my voice, while he was screaming in pain. "We had to," she insisted. "And miracles happen, Jeremiah. The agent said there is a developer looking for a quick buy in that exact area. They offered $45,000 cash. We can sign the papers today. The money could be wired to the hospital by this afternoon. It is like it was meant to be. It was meant to be because they had set it up. They had found a buyer probably weeks ago, and now they were creating the emergency to force the sale." "But 45,000, I stammered. "My father always said that land was special. He said never to sell it." "Your father is dead," Megan hissed, losing her patience. "And your son is lying right there in agony because of your stares. Are you really going to choose a patch of dirt over your own flesh and blood? Are you that selfish?" I looked down at my boots. I needed to push them just a little further. I needed them to show me who they really were. "I promised him," I whispered. "I promised I would keep it in the family. Maybe I can take a loan. Maybe I can mortgage the house. There is no time for a loan." Megan practically screamed. She stood up, pacing the small room. "Why are you making this so difficult? Do you hate us? Is that it? You want to see him fail?" That is when Terrence decided to join the fight. He sat up in bed. He didn't move like a man in pain anymore. He moved like a man fueled by rage. "Stop it, Dad," he shouted. His voice wasn't weak. It was booming. "Just stop the act. We know you don't care about the land. You just care about control. You hoard everything. You sit in that big house like a king while we drown in debt. And now I am lying here broken and you are talking about promises to a dead man." I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat up with when he had fevers. The boy I had paid tuition for, bought cars for, bailed out of trouble time and time again. "You think I am selfish?" I asked quietly. "I think you are a stubborn old fool," Terrence spat. "Look at you. You walk around in those dirty clothes driving that rust bucket truck embarrassing us. And you hold on to that scrubland like it is gold. It is dirt, Dad. It is worthless dirt. Nobody wants it. We are lucky we found a buyer stupid enough to pay 40 grand for it. You are so stupid you don't even realize we are saving you from paying taxes on nothing." His words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Worthless dirt. Stupid old fool. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear. They were trembling from the effort it took not to laugh in their faces. They thought the land was worthless because they only saw the surface. They saw weeds and rocks. They didn't see the survey markers I had seen 5 years ago. They didn't read the City Planning Commission reports that I subscribed to. They didn't know that the new interstate bypass was approved last month and that the exit ramp was slated to go right through the middle of my grandfather's pasture. That land wasn't worth $40,000. The commercial zoning reclassification had gone through 2 weeks ago. The starting bid for that parcel as of this morning was $2.2 million. And my son, my own flesh and blood, was calling me stupid while trying to scam me out of a lottery ticket he was too lazy to cash. He thought he was tricking me into selling a burden. He was actually trying to steal a fortune, and he was doing it for pennies on the dollar because he lacked the patience to dig deeper. I looked up at Terrence. His face was twisted in a sneer of contempt. He didn't love me. He didn't respect me. He didn't even pity me. He just saw me as an obstacle. "Fine," I said, my voice barely audible. What Megan asked, stopping her pacing. "Fine," I repeated, lifting my head. "You are right. I can't let you suffer. If the land can save your leg, then we have to sell it." The change in the room was instant. The tension evaporated, replaced by a greedy, electric excitement. Megan's face lit up. Terrence slumped back against the pillows, letting out a sigh that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "Thank you, Dad," Terrence said, his voice suddenly soft and pained again. "I knew you would do the right thing." Megan rushed to her purse. "I have the papers right here," she said, pulling out a thick envelope. "The agent faxed them over just in case. We just need your signature and I can run them over to the office." She had the papers ready. Of course she did. I took the pen she offered. My hand hovered over the signature line. "I will sign," I said, "but I need to go home and get the deed. I can't transfer the title without the original deed. It is in my safe." Megan hesitated. "Can't you sign the intent to sell now?" I shook my head. "No. If we are doing this, we are doing it right. I don't want any legal trouble later. I will go get the deed. I will meet you back here in 2 hours." Megan looked at Terrence. He nodded slightly. "Okay," Megan said, smiling that shark-like smile. 2 hours. Don't be late, Jeremiah. They need the money by noon." I stood up, leaving the thermos of soup on the bedside table. Neither of them looked at it. I walked out of the room, listening to the door click shut behind me. As I walked down the hallway, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I didn't dial home. I dialed the number of the only man in this city who was as ruthless as I was about to become. "Mr. Kaplan," I said when he answered. "This is Jeremiah Banks. I need you to clear your schedule. I am coming to your office and I need you to draft a purchase agreement. Purchase agreement for what Kaplan asked. For a debt," I said, stepping into the elevator. "I am about to buy my son's debt, all of it, and then I am going to foreclose on his life." I drove my rusted truck into the underground parking garage of the glimmering steel tower in the financial district. The valet looked at my dented bumper and my oil-stained jacket with a sneer, but I tossed him a $20 bill and walked past him without a word. He didn't know that I owned 3 floors of this building through a shell corporation. He didn't know that the man I was going to see, Morris Kaplan, was the most expensive shark in the city, and he cleared his schedule for me because I was his biggest client. Kaplan was waiting for me, a glass of scotch already poured. He didn't look at my clothes. He looked at my eyes. He saw the fire there. "Jeremiah," he said, his voice gravelly and serious, "you look like a man who is about to pour concrete over a body." Not a body, Morris, I said, sitting in the leather chair that cost more than my son's car. A legacy. I am burying my legacy today. I explained the situation. I told him about the broken leg that wasn't broken. I told him about the rolling pin. I told him about the $40,000 they wanted for a surgery that would never happen. Kaplan listened, his face hardening like stone. He knew Terrence. He had bailed Terrence out of legal trouble twice before at my request. He knew exactly what kind of ungrateful weight I had been carrying. So what is the play, Kaplan asked. Do we file for a restraining order? Do we cut them out of the will? No, I said. That is too easy. Cutting them out just means they leave empty-handed. I want them to leave owing me everything. I want them to feel the weight of every lie they told. I want to buy their debt. Kaplan raised an eyebrow. I explained the plan. I knew they were desperate. The investigators said they owed money to loan sharks and credit card companies. They were going to try to sell the land fast or leverage it. Set up a shell company, I instructed, something that sounds predatory, quick cash holdings or something like that. When they try to move money or when they try to borrow against assets they don't own, I want that company to be the one holding the paper. I want to own their debt, Morris, every cent of it. Kaplan smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. You want to foreclose on your own son. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. I want to teach him the difference between a gift and a loan. He thinks the world owes him. I am going to show him the bill. Get the papers ready. I have a feeling they are going to make a move on the house today while I am supposedly getting the deed. I left the office and drove back to my neighborhood. It was a quiet street lined with oak trees I had planted myself. My house was a 2-story craftsman that I had restored with my own hands. To the naked eye, it looked old and slightly weathered. The paint was peeling in spots I deliberately ignored. The porch sagged just a fraction on the left side. It looked like the home of a man who was running out of money and energy. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw the truth that only I could see. The front door jamb was splintered. The wood I had sanded and stained 30 years ago was cracked. The lock had been forced. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this might happen. I had practically invited it by telling Megan I needed to come home for the deed. But seeing the physical violation of my sanctuary sent a surge of rage through my veins that made my hands shake. I didn't rush inside. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police were a blunt instrument, and I needed a scalpel. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for my home security system. Just like the hospital, my house was wired. But these weren't standard cameras. These were high-definition lenses hidden inside the eyes of the African mahogany statues lining the hallway, buried in the smoke detectors and concealed in the antique clock on the mantelpiece. I scrolled back the footage to 20 minutes ago. There was Megan. She didn't look like the grieving daughter-in-law now. She looked like a looter. She was tearing through the living room, pulling drawers out of my desk and dumping them onto the floor. I watched on the small screen as she kicked a pile of my old blueprints. Look at this junk, she sneered, talking to herself. Just piles of trash. How does he live like this? It smells like old man and sawdust in here. She walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of my late wife, Sarah. For a second, I thought she might show some respect. Instead, she laughed. You were a fool too, Martha, she said to the photo. Leaving everything to a man who doesn't know how to spend it. We are going to put this money to better use. Europe. A new car. Real clothes. She tossed the photo face down on the table. The glass cracked. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek. That was the last photo I took of Sarah before the cancer took her. Megan knew that. She just didn't care. She moved to the kitchen. She opened the pantry, sneering at the cans of beans and soup. Disgusting, she muttered. He eats like a peasant. I can't believe I have to pretend to eat his cooking. Once he is in the home, I am burning this kitchen down and remodeling. Granite countertops, stainless steel. We will flip this dump for $500,000 easy. She walked into my study. This was where the trap was laid. I kept a small fireproof safe in the closet. It wasn't my real safe. My real safe was behind a false wall in the basement containing gold bars and the deeds to my commercial properties. This small safe was a decoy. I had left it unlocked, just slightly ajar. Megan spotted it. Her eyes lit up. Jackpot, she whispered. She pulled the door open. Inside, there was a single envelope marked Land Deed. She grabbed it, ripping it open. She pulled out the document. It was the original deed to the 10 acres in the countryside. I had left it there for her to find. I knew she wouldn't wait for me to bring it to the hospital. She wanted control. She wanted to be the one holding the paper. "Got you, you stupid old bastard," she hissed, kissing the paper. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "I am leaving the house now," she said to whoever answered. "Probably Terrence." "Yeah, I got it." "No, he isn't here. He is probably driving that slow truck halfway across town. I am going straight to the lender. We can get the cash advance today." "Yes, I have his social security number. I found it in his tax files. We can forge the signature. It is easy." She shoved the deed into her purse and ran out of the house, leaving my front door swinging open in the wind. I sat in my truck watching the live feed of my empty, violated home. She had called me a bastard. She had broken Sarah's picture. She was planning to forge my signature to get a loan against my property. She thought she had stolen the keys to the kingdom. She didn't know she had just stolen the detonator to a bomb I had built specifically for her. I waited until her car turned the corner at the end of the block. Then I picked up my phone. It rang once. "Mr. Banks," a voice answered. It was Mr. Henderson, the branch manager of the private lending firm Megan was heading to. He was another man who knew exactly who I was. He managed the financing for 3 of my apartment complexes. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice calm and deadly, "a woman named Megan Banks is coming to see you. She has a deed to a property in my name. She wants a high-interest, short-term loan. A cash advance." "I see," Henderson said. "Should I call the police for fraud?" "No," I said. "I want you to approve it." There was a pause on the line. "Excuse me, Mr. Banks. You want me to approve a fraudulent loan against your own asset?" "Yes," I said. "Give her the money. Give her exactly what she asks for. Make the interest rate predatory. Make the terms draconian. Put a clause in there that says if a single payment is missed, the lender has the right to seize all assets of the borrower to cover the balance." "I understand," Henderson said slowly. "And who will be funding this risky loan?" "I will," I said. "Use the funds from my liquid capital account. Transfer the note to Quick Cash Holdings immediately after she signs." "So you are lending your daughter-in-law money to steal from you so that you can foreclose on her," Henderson clarified. "Exactly," I said. "She wants to play with the big boys. Let her see what happens when the interest comes due. Let her sign her name next to the forgery. Let her bind herself to a debt she can never pay." "Consider it done, Mr. Banks," Henderson said. "She will walk out of here thinking she won the lottery." "She will walk out of there with a noose around her neck," I corrected, "and I will be the one holding the rope." I hung up the phone. I looked at my house one last time. I would have to fix the door jamb. I would have to sweep up the mess. I would have to frame Sarah's picture again. But first I had to go back to the hospital. I had to go back and tell them I couldn't find the deed. I had to let them think I was senile and disorganized. I had to let them think they had outsmarted me by stealing it. I started the truck. The engine roared. The game had moved to the next level. They had taken the bait. Now all I had to do was wait for the trap to snap shut. They wanted $40,000. I was going to make sure that $40,000 cost them their entire lives. The ink was barely dry on the predatory loan agreement Megan had signed when I walked back into Morris Kaplan's office. The air conditioning was humming a stark contrast to the heat radiating off the asphalt outside where I had left my truck. Kaplan was sitting behind his mahogany desk reviewing a digital file on his tablet. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of professional admiration and personal concern. "It is done," Kaplan said, sliding the tablet across the desk toward me. Megan Banks just walked out of Henderson's office with a cashier's check for $40,000. She signed the deed over as collateral. The terms are frankly disgusting. 30% interest compounding weekly with a balloon payment due in 30 days. If she defaults, the lender takes everything. The house, the cars, any future assets. She didn't even read the fine print, Jeremiah. She just saw the money and signed. I looked at the digital signature on the screen. It was a forgery of my name, clumsy, and rushed next to her own legitimate signature as the co-borrower. She had bound herself to a financial anchor that would drag her to the bottom of the ocean. "Buy it," I said, my voice flat. Kaplan nodded. He tapped a few keys on his keyboard. "I am initiating the transfer now. Quick Cash Holdings. Your shell company is purchasing the debt from Henderson's firm at full value. As of this moment, Henderson is out of the picture. He gets his commission and you get the paper." I watched the progress bar on the screen. It took 10 seconds. 10 seconds to transform from a victim of theft into the master of my enemy's fate. "Congratulations, Mr. Banks," Kaplan said softly. "You are now your son's primary creditor. You own his debt. You own his wife's debt. And effectively, since they put up your own stolen deed as collateral, you have just bought back your own property, but with a chain around their necks attached to it. I leaned back in the leather chair, closing my eyes for a moment. It wasn't a feeling of triumph. It was a heavy, cold burden. I thought about the 15 apartment buildings I owned across the city. I thought about the 300 units of affordable housing I maintained. I thought about the tenants who paid their rent on time, the single mothers and working-class families I had housed for decades. I had built that empire brick by brick, dealing with leaky roofs, broken boilers, and city inspectors. I knew the value of $1 because I had sweated for every single one. My son thought I was a poor man because I drove a truck that I could fix myself. He didn't know that the rental income from those 15 buildings flowed into investment accounts that generated more interest in a month than he earned in a year. He didn't know that I was the silent partner in the construction firm that was currently bidding on the highway expansion project that made the countryside land so valuable. "Are you sure about the next step?" Kaplan asked, interrupting my thoughts. "Once we serve them with the default notice, it is going to get ugly. They will be homeless, Jeremiah." "They are already homeless," I said, opening my eyes. "They just don't know it yet. They are living in a house of cards and they just lit a match. Keep the paperwork ready, Morris. I want the foreclosure notice drafted and ready to file the second the first payment is missed. And knowing them, they will miss it. They are going to spend that $40,000 on everything except the surgery they lied about." I stood up to leave. I had to get back into character. I had to go back to being the confused old man who lost a deed. But as I reached the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Terrence. I held the phone up to show Kaplan. "It begins," I said. I answered the call, putting it on speaker so Kaplan could hear. I pitched my voice up, adding a tremor of anxiety. "Hello, Terrence," I said. "How is the leg, son?" "Dad, listen to me." Terrence's voice came through the speaker, breathless and frantic. "We have a huge problem. A massive problem." My heart rate didn't even jump. I knew exactly what the problem was going to be. It was part of the script they were writing. "What is it?" I asked. "Is it the surgery?" "No, it is the land," Terrence said. He sounded like he was on the verge of tears. Megan went to the real estate office to get everything ready, and the agent ran a new title search. "Dad, the market crashed this morning." I frowned at the phone. The real estate market didn't crash in a morning. "What do you mean?" I asked. "The zoning board," Terrence lied, his voice speeding up. "They just released a report about toxic runoff in the water table out there. The value of the land tanked, Dad. The buyer pulled their $45,000 offer. They said the land is practically worthless now. They are saying it is a liability." I looked at Kaplan. He was shaking his head, a look of disgust on his face. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. They had the cash in hand from the loan, but they still wanted to get me to sign over the land legally so they could sell it twice. Or maybe they just wanted to ensure I couldn't fight them when they flipped it for millions. "So, we can't pay for the surgery?" I asked, letting panic seep into my voice. "We might still have a chance," Terrence said. "Megan found a liquidation firm. They buy distressed assets. They offered $5,000 for the deed, Dad." $5,000. That is it. But if we combine that with credit cards and maybe a loan from Megan's parents, we might just barely cover the hospital bills. He was lying about everything. Megan's parents were broke. The liquidation firm didn't exist. They just wanted me to sign the rights away for nothing so they could keep the $40,000 loan and the eventual $2 million sale. $5,000, I whispered. "But my father." "Forget your father," Terrence shouted, snapping. "I am your son. I am the one suffering here. Look, the liquidation firm needs a power of attorney. They won't deal with you directly because the title is flagged for environmental review. They need me or Megan to have the legal authority to sign the hazardous waste waivers. Power of attorney." There it was. The golden ticket. If I signed a power of attorney, they wouldn't just take the land. They would drain my bank accounts. They would take the house I lived in. They would strip me naked and leave me by the side of the road. "I don't know, son," I said. "That sounds complicated. I should probably talk to a lawyer." "No lawyers," Terrence screamed. "We don't have time and we don't have money for lawyers." "Do you want me to lose my leg? Is that what you want?" I paused. I let the silence stretch out, making him sweat. "No," I said finally. "I don't want you to lose your leg." "Then you have to sign Dad. We are having a little get-together tonight at our house. Just a few friends, a sort of prayer circle for my recovery. Megan is cooking. Please just come over. We can sign the papers there, surrounded by family. It will be a celebration of us saving this disaster." A celebration. They were throwing a party. They had $40,000 of stolen money burning a hole in their pockets, and they were going to throw a party to celebrate their victory over the stupid old man. They wanted me there to sign my life away in front of an audience so I couldn't back out. Okay, I said. Okay, Terrence, I will come. I will bring the pen. Great, Dad. Really great. Terrence said, the relief audible. Come at 7. And Dad dress nice. Okay. Megan invited some important people from her church. Don't wear the work boots. I looked down at my boots. They were covered in dust from a site visit I had done yesterday at a 20-story high-rise I owned. I will wear my best suit, I promised. I hung up the phone. The office was silent. He wants power of attorney, Kaplan said. He is going for the throat. He is going for the throat, I agreed. But he doesn't know I am wearing a gorget of steel. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city I had helped build. I am going to that party, Morris, I said, and I am going to sign a paper. But it won't be a power of attorney. Kaplan stood up too. You want the other envelope? Yes, I said, the one with the red seal. And call the sheriff. Tell him I might need an escort around 8 o'clock. I walked out of the office. The game was rigged, but they didn't know I was the one who shuffled the deck. They wanted a celebration. I was going to give them a funeral. I left Kaplan's office with a heavy briefcase and a heavier heart. The legal trap was set. The financial noose was ready. But there was one loose thread that kept pulling at my conscience. One innocent bystander standing in the middle of the blast zone I was about to create. Leo, my 10-year-old grandson. He was the only reason I had tolerated Megan for this long. He was a bright, sensitive boy with my eyes and his father's smile before his father's smile turned into a sneer. I hadn't seen him in 3 days. Megan had been keeping him away, probably using him as a pawn in her head games or simply neglecting him while she plotted my demise. I checked my watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. School let out at 3. I steered my truck toward the private elementary school on the north side of town. It was an expensive school, the kind with manicured lawns and security guards who looked like Secret Service agents. I paid the tuition every semester. I sent the checks directly to the administration so Megan couldn't intercept the funds. To her, it was just a given that Leo went there. To me, it was an investment in the only future I had left. I pulled into the pickup line, my rusted Ford looking like a scar amongst the lineup of gleaming white Range Rovers and black Mercedes SUVs. The mothers in the other cars stared at me. Some locked their doors. I didn't care. I sat there, engine idling, watching the double doors. When the bell rang, a sea of uniforms spilled out. I scanned the faces until I saw him. Leo was walking alone, dragging his backpack in the dirt. He didn't run like the other kids. He walked with his head down, shoulders hunched, looking at his feet. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, not a fourth grader. I honked the horn lightly. Leo looked up. When he saw the truck, his face didn't light up. It froze. He looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was watching him before he ran over and climbed into the passenger seat. Hi, Grandpa, he said, his voice small. He buckled his seatbelt immediately, his movements jerky and anxious. Hey there, little man, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I forced a smile I didn't feel. Your dad is a little tied up with his leg, and your mom is busy helping him, so I thought I would come get you. We can go get some ice cream before I take you home. Leo didn't smile back. He shrank into the seat, pulling his knees up to his chest. No ice cream, Grandpa. Please. Just take me home. Mom said I have to be home by 3:30. She said if I am not there, she gets a headache. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Megan didn't get headaches. She gave them. Is everything okay at home, Leo? I asked, pulling out of the line. Leo stared out the window. Yeah, it is fine. Dad hurt his leg. I know, I said. I saw him. Leo turned to me, his brown eyes wide and filled with a fear that no child should ever know. Did you give them the money, Grandpa? I almost slammed on the brakes. I kept driving, keeping my eyes on the road, my grip tightening on the wheel. What money are you talking about, son? The money for the house, Leo whispered. Mom and Dad were fighting last night. Well, not fighting. They were celebrating, but it sounded like fighting. They were drinking the loud water. Loud water. That was what he called champagne. What did they say, Leo? Leo picked at a loose thread on his uniform. Mom said that you were finally going to pay up. She said that once you sign the papers, we are going to be rich. She said we are going to move into your big house, and I can finally have a room that doesn't smell like mold. My heart broke a little. They lived in a rented duplex that I paid for, but evidently they weren't using the maintenance money I sent them to keep it clean. I glanced at him. And where am I going to live if you move into my house? Leo went silent. He bit his lip, tears welling up in his eyes. Leo, I said gently, you can tell me. I won't be mad at you. I promise. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Mom said you are going away, Grandpa. She said you are old and sick in the head. She said you are going to a special place where doctors can watch you so you don't hurt yourself. She said it is for your own good because you don't know what is happening anymore. I felt the blood rush to my face. It was one thing to hear them plotting on a hidden camera. It was another thing entirely to hear my grandson parroting their lies. They were preparing him. They were preloading the narrative so that when they locked me away, Leo wouldn't ask questions. He would think he was being protected from a crazy old man. Is that what you think, Leo? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Do you think Grandpa is sick in the head? Do you think I don't know what is happening? Leo looked at me. He looked at my hands on the wheel, steady and strong. He looked at the dashboard where I kept my engineering rulers and my schematics. No, he said quietly. You are the smartest person I know. You built my treehouse without looking at the instructions. You fixed my bike when Dad couldn't. You aren't sick. Thank you, Leo, I said, choking back a sob. Thank you. But Grandpa, he continued, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper, why does Mom hate you so much? I pulled the truck over. We were in a quiet residential street under the shade of a large maple tree. I put the truck in park and turned to face him. What do you mean, Leo? Leo started to cry. Huge, silent tears rolled down his cheeks. He looked terrified, as if just speaking the words would summon a demon. She talks about you when she thinks I am asleep, he sobbed. She tells Dad that it is not fair. She says that we are smarter than you. She says that because she is white and Dad is half white, they deserve the money more than you do. She says you are just a dirty old laborer who got lucky. The air left the cab. I sat there stunned as the ugly naked face of racism stared back at me from my grandson's tear-stained face. I knew Megan was greedy. I knew she was cruel. But I had never realized how deep the rot went. She wasn't just entitled. She was a bigot who had married a black man for his inheritance and was now teaching their son to despise his own heritage. She told you that I asked, my voice barely a rasp. She tells me I have to be more like her, Leo cried. She says I have to scrub my skin hard in the bath to get the dirt off. But it is not dirt, Grandpa. It is just my skin. It doesn't come off. I tried. I used the scrubbing brush and it just bled, but it didn't turn white. I closed my eyes, a physical pain shooting through my chest. My grandson, my beautiful, innocent grandson, had been scrubbing his own skin until he bled because his mother told him his blackness was dirt. This wasn't just theft anymore. This wasn't just fraud. This was child abuse. This was soul murder. I reached out and pulled Leo into a hug. He buried his face in my jacket, sobbing uncontrollably. I held him tight, my hand cradling the back of his head. I felt a rage so pure and white-hot that it almost blinded me. Listen to me, Leo, I said, pulling back to look him in the eye. I wiped his tears with my thumb. Your skin is beautiful. You are beautiful. You are strong and you are smart and you are perfect exactly the way you are. Do you hear me? He nodded, sniffing. Your mother is wrong, I said firmly. She is wrong about me, and she is wrong about you. And I am not going anywhere. I am not going to any home. I am going to stay right here, and I am going to take care of you. But she said you are going to die soon, Leo whispered, his voice trembling. She told Dad that if the stress doesn't kill you, maybe you will just have an accident like Uncle Marcus. She said it would be a blessing. She said she prays for it. Uncle Marcus. My brother. He died in a car accident 10 years ago. It was a tragedy that broke our family, and she was using it as a blueprint. She wasn't just waiting for me to die, she was wishing for it. She was discussing it openly in front of a child. That was it. That was the line. They could take my money. They could take my house. But they had tried to poison this boy against himself. They had tried to erase his identity and fill him with self-loathing so he would be a compliant heir to a fortune they hadn't earned. I looked at Leo. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw trust. He had told me. He had chosen me over them. "I am not going to die, Leo," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "And you are not going back to that house to be told you are dirty. Not today, not ever again." But the party, Leo said. Leo. The prayer circle. Mom said I have to wear my suit. She said important people are coming to watch you sign the papers. "Oh, we are going to the party," I said, putting the truck in gear. "We are definitely going to the party. But we aren't going there to pray." I pulled the truck back onto the road. The plan had changed. I wasn't just going to foreclose on them. I wasn't just going to take their money. I was going to take their victim. I looked at Leo one last time. He had stopped crying. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, he looked safe. "Grandpa," he asked, "are you mad?" "Yes, Leo," I said, staring straight ahead at the road that led to the destruction of my son's life. "I am very mad. But don't worry," I added softly. "I am not mad at you. I am mad at the wolves. And tonight, the wolves are going to learn what happens when they try to eat the lion's cub." I reached for my phone and dialed Kaplan again. "Change of plans," I said when he answered. "Add a custody petition to the file. Emergency temporary guardianship based on psychological abuse. I have a witness. And Morris. Call the Child Protective Services contact you have. I want a caseworker on standby tonight." I hung up. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city I built. Darkness was coming. And for Megan and Terrence, the sun was never going to rise again. The duplex sat on the corner of Elm and Pine, bathed in the warm glow of string lights that had been draped carelessly over the porch railing. To anyone driving by, it looked like a scene from a magazine, a celebration of life and family. To me, it looked like a crime scene waiting to be processed. I parked my truck down the street far enough away that the oil leaks wouldn't stain the pavement in front of their neighbors' houses, but close enough that I could see the lineup of cars in the driveway. There were BMWs, a Lexus, and Megan's brand new Audi, the one she claimed she leased with a work bonus, but I knew was paid for by the credit card she opened in my name 3 months ago. I sat in the cab for a moment, smoothing the fabric of my suit. It was a charcoal gray, 3-piece tailored 20 years ago for my wife's funeral. It was a little tight across the shoulders now, but the wool was high quality. I had brushed the dust off my boots, but I couldn't scrub the calluses off my hands. To the people inside that house, I was just a prop. I was the atmospheric background noise for their success story. I walked up the driveway, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the house. They didn't know that I owned the mortgage note on this property. 3 years ago, when their landlord threatened to evict them for late rent, I bought the building through a shell corporation. I lowered the rent by 40% and froze it for 5 years. They thought they had charmed a gullible landlord. They didn't know their father was the one keeping a roof over their heads while they plotted to steal the roof over his. The front door was open. Laughter spilled out into the night air, brittle and loud. I stepped over the threshold and the noise died down instantly. It was like walking into a saloon in an old Western movie when the stranger pushes through the doors. There were about 15 people in the living room. I recognized a few faces from Megan's church people who sat in the front pew and judged everyone in the back. There was her best friend Sarah, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. There was a man I didn't know wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, holding a crystal tumbler of whiskey. Jeremiah, Megan's voice cut through the silence. She emerged from the kitchen wearing a dress that glittered under the recessed lighting. She held a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "You made it. And look at you. You really cleaned up." It was a compliment wrapped in barbed wire. She was telling the room that my looking presentable was a surprise, an anomaly. I nodded, clutching my hat in my hands. "I told you I would come, Megan. How is the boy?" "He is resting," she said, gesturing toward the living room center. "He is so brave, Jeremiah. He is holding on just for you." I looked toward the recliner in the corner. Terrence was sitting there, his leg propped up on a velvet ottoman. The cast was pristine white, a stark contrast to the dark bruises I knew were hiding underneath. He looked pale, his face drawn. If I hadn't seen him eating pizza at 2 a.m, I would have believed he was dying. Dad, Terrence croaked. His voice was weak, theatrical. "Thanks for coming. I know you hate leaving your house." I walked over to him. The guests parted like the Red Sea, giving me a wide berth. They didn't want to touch the old laborer. I stood over my son. I looked at his leg. "Does it hurt, son?" I asked. "It is agony, Dad," he whispered, closing his eyes. "But knowing you are here to help, it makes it better." I felt a surge of nausea. The manipulation was so thick I could taste it. "Can I get you a drink?" Jeremiah Megan asked, appearing at my elbow. I looked around the room. Everyone was holding heavy crystal glasses filled with deep red wine or amber whiskey. The bottles were on the sideboard. I recognized the labels. The whiskey was a single malt aged 18 years. The wine was a French Bordeaux that retailed for $80 a bottle. They were drinking away the loan money before the ink was even dry. "Sure," I said. "A little wine would be nice." Megan smiled. "I have just the thing." She walked to the sideboard. I watched her. She didn't reach for the Bordeaux. She reached under the table and pulled out a box of generic supermarket red wine. She poured it into a red plastic solo cup. "Here you go," she said, handing me the cup. "We didn't want you to worry about breaking the crystal. You know how your hands shake sometimes." My hands didn't shake. My hands were steady enough to weld steel beams at 40 stories up. But this was part of the narrative. Jeremiah is old. Jeremiah is frail. Jeremiah breaks nice things. I took the cup. The plastic crinkled in my grip. I looked at the dark purple liquid. It smelled like vinegar and sugar. I looked at the man in the expensive suit. He was swirling his $80 wine, looking at me with a smirk. "Thank you, Megan," I said, raising the plastic cup. "You always think of everything." I didn't drink it. I held it like a badge of dishonor. The room slowly returned to its chatter, but the eyes were still on me. I heard whispers. "That is him," a woman murmured. "The one who pushed him down the stairs." "No," I heard Sarah whisper back. "He didn't push him. He just let the house rot until the stairs collapsed. Same difference. Negligence is abuse." I stood there surrounded by enemies holding my cup of vinegar wine, and I waited. I knew the main event was coming. They hadn't invited these people for a party. They had invited witnesses. They wanted an audience for my submission. 10 minutes later, Megan clapped her hands. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," she called out. The room went silent again. Megan walked to the center of the room, standing next to Terrence's chair. She placed a hand on his shoulder, the picture of the devoted, suffering wife. "As you all know, we have had a terrible tragedy," she began, her voice trembling perfectly. "Terrence's injury has changed our lives. The medical bills are overwhelming, and the road to recovery is going to be long and expensive." She paused for effect. A few people murmured sympathetic noises, but she continued smiling through her tears. "God is good. He has provided a way out. Jeremiah, my father-in-law, has agreed to help us. He has agreed to make the sacrifice to save his son's leg." She turned to me. The spotlight was on me now. "Dad," she said, holding out a thick manila envelope, "the buyer is ready. The liquidation firm is standing by. We just need you to sign the authorization so we can transfer the deed and pay the surgeon. The doctor is waiting for the wire transfer tonight. If we don't do it now, they cancel the surgery tomorrow morning." She placed the envelope on the coffee table in front of Terrence. She pulled a pen from her pocket. It was a heavy gold-plated pen. "Come sit, Jeremiah," she said, patting the spot on the sofa next to Terrence. I walked over slowly, my boots heavy on the carpet. I sat down. The sofa was soft, swallowing me up, making me feel smaller than I was. Terrence looked at me. His eyes were wide and wet. "Please, Dad," he whispered. "Just sign it. End this nightmare." I looked at the document Megan had slid out of the envelope. It wasn't a deed transfer. I read the title of the top of the page. It was bold black text, "Durable Power of Attorney." I felt a cold shock even though I had expected it. This wasn't just about the land. This document gave them total control. It gave them the right to access my bank accounts, sell my house, manage my health care, and make legal decisions on my behalf. It was a total surrender of my civil rights. If I signed this, they wouldn't just take the land. They would throw me into a state-run facility and drain every penny I had hidden away. I looked up at Megan. She was smiling, but her eyes were hard as flint. This says power of attorney, Megan," I said, my voice shaking just enough. "I thought it was just for the land." "It is," Dad Terrence interjected quickly. "It is a limited power of attorney, just for the assets related to the land. The lawyer said it was the fastest way to clear the environmental holds. You don't have to worry about the legal mumbo-jumbo. Just sign by the X." He was lying to my face in front of 20 people. It wasn't limited. It was general. It was absolute. I looked around the room. The guests were watching intently. They were the pressure cooker. If I refused, I was the monster who let his son rot. If I signed, I was the victim who dug his own grave. "Come on, Mr. Banks," the man in the expensive suit called out. "Do the right thing. Don't let your son suffer over paperwork." "Yeah, sign it, Jeremiah," someone else said. "Be a father." The peer pressure hit me like a physical wave. They were all in on it, or they were all fooled. It didn't matter. They were the weapon Megan was wielding. I looked at the pen. I reached out and took it. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. Megan let out a breath she had been holding. Her shoulders relaxed. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over. I hovered the pen over the signature line. "I just want to help," I said softly. "You are helping Dad," Terrence said, leaning forward, his greed overcoming his fake pain. "You are saving us." I looked at the paper one last time. Then I looked at Megan. I lowered the pen. But I didn't sign. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, the same pocket where I kept the wallet they despised. "I have something for you, too," I said. Megan frowned. What? I pulled out a white envelope. It didn't look special. It was a standard legal envelope, but inside was a document drafted by Morris Kaplan just 2 hours ago. Before I signed this, I said, my voice suddenly losing its tremor. My voice became the voice of the foreman who shouted orders over the roar of jackhammers. "I need you to look at this." I tossed the envelope onto the table right on top of the power of attorney. "What is this?" Megan asked, her smile faltering. "Open it," I said. She picked it up, her fingers fumbling slightly. She tore it open. She pulled out the folded paper. It was a lawsuit. A lawsuit for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. And stapled to the back was a subpoena for a custody hearing regarding one Leo Banks. Megan read the first few lines. Her face went from flushed to chalk white in seconds. What is this?" she stammered. "Is this a joke?" I stood up. I didn't hunch my shoulders anymore. I stood at my full height, 6 feet 2 inches of muscle and bone that had built skyscrapers. "No joke, Megan," I boomed. The room went dead silent. The man with the whiskey lowered his glass. "You want me to sign away my life," I said, looking down at them. "You want me to give you everything I worked for. You beat yourself with a rolling pin to fake an injury. You lied about surgery. You terrorized my grandson. And you invited all these people here to watch you rob me." Terrence sat up straight, forgetting his broken leg entirely. "Dad, shut up," he hissed. "You are making a scene." "I am just getting started," I said. "You want a signature?" "Here is my signature." I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I tossed it onto the table. "That is the security footage from room 304, I said. 2 a.m., pizza, beer, and a rolling pin. Megan gasped. She looked at the guests who were now whispering frantically. "He is crazy," she screamed, pointing at me. "He is senile. He doesn't know what he is saying. Somebody call the police." I smiled. A cold, hard smile. "Don't worry, Megan," I said. "I already called them." At that moment, the front door, which I had left unlatched when I entered, pushed open. Morris Kaplan walked in. He was wearing a trench coat and carrying a briefcase. Behind him were 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies. Mr. Banks Kaplan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "Is this the party?" "This is the party, Morris," I said. But I think the music just stopped. Megan looked at the cops, then at me, then at the paper in her hand. Her house of cards wasn't just falling, it was catching fire, and I was holding the match. The heavy gold pen felt like a piece of ice in my hand. It was weighty, expensive, and utterly pretentious, just like the people staring at me from every corner of the living room. I held it, hovered over the signature line of the durable power of attorney document. The paper was thick and cream-colored, the kind of stationery lawyers use when they want to make theft look like a transaction. My hand trembled. To Megan and Terrence, it looked like the frailty of a 69-year-old man whose nerves were shot. To me, it was the vibration of a boiler about to explode. I looked at the signature line. X marks the spot where Jeremiah Banks ceases to exist as a free man. X marks the spot where I become a ward of the state, a prisoner in my own mind, according to their narrative. Megan leaned forward, her perfume cloying and suffocating. "Just right there, Jeremiah," she whispered, her voice dripping with fake encouragement. "Just a little scratch of the pen and we can take care of everything. We can fix Terrence's leg. We can save the family." I looked at Terrence. He was sweating, his eyes locked on the tip of the pen. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at his salvation. He was looking at the key to a vault he hadn't earned. I lowered the pen until the tip touched the paper. A collective breath was held in the room. The man in the expensive suit stopped swirling his wine. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. They were all vultures waiting for the carcass to stop moving. Then I lifted the pen. I didn't sign. I slowly, deliberately capped the pen. The click of the cap snapping into place was the loudest sound in the room. I placed the pen gently on the coffee table right next to the fraudulent contract. "What are you doing?" Dad Terrence asked, his voice tight with panic. "You have to sign it. The money. The surgery." I sat back into the soft cushions of the sofa, crossing my arms over my chest. I looked at Megan. Her smile was starting to crack at the edges, revealing the panic underneath. "I don't think I will sign this, Megan," I said, my voice low and steady. "It doesn't seem right. It seems like a lot of power to give to someone who beats her husband with a rolling pin." Megan froze. Her eyes darted to the guests. "What did you say?" she hissed. I ignored her. I reached into the inner pocket of my faded denim jacket. It was the pocket where I kept my heart medication, or so they thought. But today it held something much more potent than nitroglycerin. I pulled out a thick white envelope. It was sealed with red wax, an old-school touch that Morris Kaplan insisted on for important documents. It looked official. It looked dangerous. "I think you should sign this instead," I said, tossing the envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy slap covering the power of attorney document. Megan stared at it. "What is that?" "Open it," I said. "Go ahead. It is addressed to you, and to Terrence." She reached out, her acrylic nails clicking against the paper. She ripped it open, tearing the red seal. She pulled out the folded legal documents. She unfolded them, her eyes scanning the header. I watched her face. I watched the color drain from her cheeks, leaving her pale and ghostly beneath her heavy makeup. I watched her mouth open and close like a fish gasping for air. "This," she stammered, "this is a lawsuit." "Read the charges, Megan," I said coldly. "Read them out loud so your prayer circle can hear what they are really praying for." She didn't read them. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking too hard. She dropped the papers onto the table as if they were burning her skin. "Elder abuse," I said, my voice rising to fill the room. "Fraud. Conspiracy to commit theft, identity theft, and petition for emergency custody of a minor." The room erupted into whispers. Terrence snatched the papers from the table. He read them, his eyes bulging. "You are suing us," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You are suing your own son." "I am suing the criminals who live in my house," I corrected. "And I am evicting them too." Megan stared at me for a second, stunned silence stretching between us. Then a strange thing happened. She started to laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a cruel, high-pitched cackle that grated on the nerves. She laughed until she was doubled over, clutching her stomach. She looked at her friends, seeking their validation. "Oh my God," she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye. "This is rich. This is absolutely priceless." She picked up the lawsuit and waved it in the air like a flag. "Did you hear that, everyone?" she shouted to the room. "The old man is suing us. He thinks he is a lawyer now." She turned to me, her face twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. "Jeremiah, where did you get this? Did you print it off the internet at the public library? Did you pay some storefront paralegal $20 to type this up for you?" The guests started to chuckle. The tension in the room broke, replaced by a wave of mockery. They looked at my worn boots. They looked at my calloused hands. They looked at the cheap suit I had worn to my wife's funeral. And they decided I was a joke. "He probably traded his food stamps for legal advice," the man in the expensive suit drawled, taking a sip of his whiskey. "These senile old-timers get paranoid. They watch too many courtroom dramas on daytime TV." Megan walked up to me, invading my personal space. She poked me in the chest with a sharp fingernail. "You pathetic old man," she spat. "Do you have any idea how much a real lawyer costs? Do you have any idea what kind of retainer you need to file a lawsuit like this in the Superior Court? You don't have $500 to your name, Jeremiah. You had to borrow money from a loan shark just to pay for my husband's fake surgery." She looked back at Terrence. "Honey, look at him. He is losing it. He really thinks this piece of paper means something. It is sad, really. We try to help him, we try to take care of him, and this is how he repays us, with make-believe lawsuits." Terrence let out a breathy laugh, shaking his head. "Dad, this is embarrassing. Just put the paper away. We won't tell anyone you had an episode." Just sign the power of attorney and we can forget this ever happened. You can't afford a legal battle. You can barely afford gas for your truck." The room was laughing at me. They were laughing at the man who had built half the skyline they saw from their office windows. They were laughing at the man who owned the mortgage on the floor they were standing on. They saw a black man in work clothes and assumed I was powerless. They assumed I was stupid. They assumed I was broke. I sat there stone-faced, letting their laughter wash over me. I let them have their moment. I let them feel superior, because the higher they climbed on their pedestal of arrogance, the harder the fall was going to be. "Who is your lawyer?" Jeremiah Megan taunted, leaning down to my eye level. "Is it one of your drinking buddies from the construction site? Is it a public defender? Tell me so I can send him a thank you card for the laugh." I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. "My lawyer is Morris Kaplan," I said softly. The room went quiet for a split second. Then the laughter returned louder than before. Morris Kaplan, the man in the suit, choked on his drink. The Morris Kaplan, the shark of Wall Street. Old man Kaplan doesn't get out of bed for less than $5,000 an hour. He represents Fortune 500 companies. He doesn't represent retired bricklayers. He wouldn't even let you in the lobby, Megan jeered. "You are delusional. This is proof, everyone. He is hallucinating. He thinks he hired the most expensive lawyer in the city. We need to get that guardianship signed tonight for his own safety." She reached for the pen again, her confidence fully restored. She thought I was bluffing. She thought I was a senile old man making up stories to feel important. I checked my watch. It was exactly 8 o'clock. I stood up. I didn't need to say another word. At that exact moment, the front door swung open. I had left the latch undone when I entered a small detail Megan had missed in her excitement to rob me. The heavy oak door hit the wall with a thud that silenced the room instantly. The laughter died in their throats. The smiles vanished. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights, stood a figure that commanded instant respect. He was wearing a bespoke Italian trench coat over a charcoal suit that cost more than Megan's car. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a gold-tipped cane in the other, not because he needed it, but because he liked the way it sounded on the pavement. It was Morris Kaplan, and he wasn't alone. Flanking him were 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, their hands resting on their belts, their faces grim and serious. Morris stepped into the room. His shoes clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at Terrence. He didn't look at Megan. He looked straight at me. He nodded respectfully. "Mr. Banks Morris," said, his voice deep and resonant, projecting to every corner of the silent room. "I apologize for the intrusion, but you instructed me to deliver the original service of process personally if the defendants proved difficult." Megan dropped the pen. It clattered onto the floor, rolling under the sofa. She stared at Morris Kaplan, her mouth agape. She knew his face. Everyone in the city knew his face from the billboards and the news. "Morris," I said, nodding back. "You are right on time. They were just telling me I couldn't afford you." Morris turned his gaze to Megan. It was like a spotlight turning on a cockroach. He looked her up and down with a cold, professional detachment that was more terrifying than anger. "Mrs. Banks, I presume," Morris said. He walked over to the table and picked up the lawsuit Megan had mocked. He smoothed it out. "You seem to be under a misapprehension, madam. Mr. Banks did not print this off the internet. I drafted it myself this afternoon in my office, which Mr. Banks owns, by the way, along with the building it is situated in." A gasp went through the room. The man with the whiskey put his glass down on a coaster with a trembling hand. "Owns the building," Terrence whispered. "What are you talking about?" Morris ignored him. He turned to the deputies. "Officers, please secure the premises. We have reason to believe that evidence of federal fraud and elder abuse is being destroyed in this residence." One of the deputies stepped forward. "Ma'am, step away from the table," he ordered Megan. Megan stumbled back, her face draining of all color. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. She looked at my clothes, then at Kaplan, then back at me. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her brain. The poor old man she planned to crush was standing next to the most powerful lawyer in the city, and the lawyer was treating him like a boss. But he is broke," Megan squeaked. "He borrowed money. The land deed." Mr. Kaplan smiled. It was a shark's smile. "The loan you took out today was purchased by Quick Cash Holdings an hour ago," Morris said smoothly. "Quick Cash Holdings is a subsidiary of Banks Enterprises. Mr. Banks lent you the money to steal from him, Megan. He owns your debt. He owns your lease. And as of right now, he is foreclosing on your entire reality." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of a predator realizing it has walked into a trap set by a much larger, much hungrier beast. I stepped forward. I looked at my son cowering in his chair. I looked at my daughter-in-law trembling against the wall. "You wanted a show?" I said, my voice calm and cold. "You wanted witnesses. Well, here they are." I pointed to the TV mounted on the wall. "Morris, play the tape." Kaplan pulled a remote from his pocket. He pointed it at the smart TV. The screen flickered to life. And there, in high definition, was the footage from room 304. 2 a.m. The pizza, the beer, and the rolling pin. The guests gasped. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. Megan let out a scream that sounded like a wounded animal. "No, turn it off." But it was too late. The truth was out, and the nightmare for them was just beginning. The 65-inch smart television mounted above the fireplace was usually reserved for reality shows and football games distractions that allowed my son and his wife to ignore the reality of their mounting debts. But tonight it became the canvas for a different kind of reality, a cinema verite of betrayal that would sear itself into the memories of everyone in the room. Morris Kaplan pressed the play button on the remote with the casual elegance of a man who knew exactly how the story ended. The screen flickered from black to the grainy, monochromatic night vision of the hospital security feed. The timestamp in the corner read 0200 hours. The room was silent, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. 20 pairs of eyes were glued to the screen. Megan stood frozen near the coffee table, her hands trembling, her face a mask of creeping dread. Terrence was gripping the armrests of his recliner, his knuckles white, his eyes darting between the screen and the exit that was now blocked by a sheriff's deputy. On the screen, the image resolved. There was Terrence. He was alone in the hospital room. To the uninitiated, it might have looked like a boring medical feed. But then the movement started. The man who had been moaning in agony just minutes ago on that very recliner, the man who claimed his leg was shattered, sat up in the hospital bed with the fluidity of a gymnast. A collective gasp rippled through the living room. It was a sharp intake of breath, like the air being sucked out of the room. On the screen, Terrence reached for the pizza box. He opened it, grabbed a slice, and took a bite that tore a string of cheese loose. He chewed with gusto, wiping grease on his hospital gown. Then he reached down. He scratched inside his cast with a ruler, digging deep, twisting his leg this way and that to get the right angle. "Look at his leg," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Look at the knee." The guests leaned in. On the giant screen, it was undeniable. Terrence bent his leg. The cast shifted. The knee flexed. A leg with a shattered structural integrity does not flex. It screams. But on the screen, Terrence just grabbed a beer can from the bedside table and toasted the empty room. "He is drinking," someone whispered. I think it was Sarah from the church choir. "He is drinking beer in the hospital. He is moving his leg." The man in the expensive suit said, his voice losing its arrogant drawl. "That leg isn't broken." Megan let out a strangled sound, a high-pitched whimper. "Stop it," she squeaked. "Stop it right now. This is fake." He edited it. He used deep fake technology. Morris Kaplan didn't even look at her. He just turned up the volume. The audio filled the living room, crisp and damning. The door on the screen opened. Megan walked in. "Is the old man gone, the digital?" Megan asked. "Yeah," the digital Terrence replied, laughing through a mouthful of pepperoni. "He bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought he was going to cry when I did the whole, 'oh God, it hurts' routine." The real Megan in the living room flinched as if she had been slapped. Her friends turned to look at her. The expressions on their faces shifted from confusion to a dawning, horrified realization. They weren't looking at a victim anymore. They were looking at a predator. On the screen, the conversation continued. They talked about the money. They talked about the $5,000 I had given them. "It is a start," the digital Megan said, "but it is not enough. We need 40,000 for the surgery lie." The surgery lie. The words echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls, landing hard in the center of the gathering. The guests looked at each other. They had brought casseroles. They had signed get-well cards. They had prayed. And it was all a lie, a $40,000 lie. "That is not what I meant," the real Megan shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "I meant the surgery costs. It is out of context." Morris Kaplan paused the video for a second. He looked at Megan. Out of context, he repeated dryly. Let us see the context then. He pressed play. The scene on the screen shifted. Megan reached into her bag. She pulled out the rolling pin. The room went deadly quiet. Even the breathing seemed to stop. "What is she doing?" Sarah whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "Ready the digital?" Megan asked. "Just do it quick," the digital Terrence said. And then the violence began. The sound of the wood hitting flesh was amplified by the television's surround sound system. Thud, thud, thud. It was a wet, heavy sound, sickeningly real. On the screen, Terrence winced, but he didn't scream in agony. He bore it. He took the beating like a man taking a payment. "We need it to be purple by morning," the digital Megan said, raising the weapon again. In the living room, a woman started to cry. It was a soft, horrified sobbing. The man in the suit looked green. He set his wineglass down on the table with a clatter, looking as if he might be sick. "This is barbaric," he muttered. "This is absolutely sick." Megan, who had been standing frozen, suddenly snapped. The reality of her exposure, the destruction of her carefully crafted image, the loss of her social standing, it all crashed down on her at once. She let out a primal scream of rage. "Turn it off," she shrieked. She lunged, not at me, not at Kaplan. She lunged at the television. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the mantelpiece flowers and water spilling everywhere, and charged toward the screen as if breaking the glass would erase the truth. No, Terrence yelled from his chair, but he didn't move to stop her. He was paralyzed by his own exposure. Megan swung the vase, but she never made contact. The deputy standing by the wall moved with surprising speed. He intercepted her, grabbing her arm mid-swing. The vase flew from her hand and smashed against the stone hearth, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. "Let me go," Megan screamed, thrashing in the deputy's grip. "You can't show this. It is private. It is my house. Get out! Get out!" Her face was twisted ugly with hate and panic. Her hair, usually so perfect, was falling into her eyes. She looked like a wild animal caught in a trap, biting and clawing at the bars. The deputy spun her around and pinned her arms behind her back. "Ma'am, calm down," he ordered, his voice booming. "You are assaulting a piece of evidence." "Evidence," she spat. "It is lies." The old man made it up. "He hates us. He wants to destroy us because we are happy." "Happy," I said, stepping forward. My voice was low, but it carried over her screaming. "Is that what you call happiness, Megan? Beating your husband with a kitchen utensil to scam his father, terrorizing your son, teaching him to hate his own skin." I looked at the guests. They were shrinking away from her, huddled together in the corners of the room. The facade of the perfect Christian family had been blown apart, revealing the rotting framework underneath. Sarah, Megan's best friend, stood up. She was shaking. "You told me he fell," Sarah said, her voice trembling with betrayal. "You told me Jeremiah wouldn't fix the stairs. You told me he was a monster." "He is!" Megan yelled, struggling against the deputy. "He is a monster. Look at him. He is rich and he lets us live in squalor. He has millions and he gives us nothing. He deserves to be robbed." The room gasped again. She had admitted it. In her rage, she had confessed. Kaplan smiled. It was a small, tight smile of professional satisfaction. "Thank you for that admission on the record," Mrs. Banks Kaplan said. "The deputies are wearing body cameras." Megan froze. She slumped in the deputy's grip, the fight draining out of her. She looked at Terrence. "Do something," she whimpered. "Tell them. Tell them he forced us." Terrence sat in his recliner, the white cast gleaming under the lights. He looked at his wife. He looked at the deputies. He looked at the video still frozen on the screen, showing him eating pizza while his leg was supposedly shattered. He looked at me. "Dad," he whispered. "I didn't want to do it. She made me." I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had let his wife beat him to steal from me. I looked at the man who had let his son believe he was dirty. "You are a grown man, Terrence," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "Nobody makes you do anything you don't want to do. You did it because you are greedy. You did it because you are lazy. You did it because you thought I was too stupid to catch you." I walked over to his chair. I stood right in front of him. He shrank back, trying to push himself deeper into the upholstery. I looked at his leg. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pocket knife. I flicked it open. The guest gasped, thinking I was going to hurt him. The deputy took a step forward, but Kaplan held up a hand. "Let him finish." I didn't cut Terrence. I reached down and tapped the blade against the hard plaster of the cast. It made a hollow, dull sound. "You know what the funny thing is, son," I said, looking him in the eye. I really would have given you the land. If you had just asked. If you had just been honest. If you had come to me and said, Dad, we are drowning, I would have helped you. I would have taught you how to swim. Terrence started to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of a man who realizes he has thrown away a diamond to pick up a piece of broken glass. But you didn't want help, I continued. You wanted a victim. You wanted to bleed me dry. I tapped the cast again with the knife. This cast, I said, gesturing to the plaster. It is a work of art. Really. It looks very convincing. It must have taken hours to apply. I stood up straight, snapping the knife closed. But here is the reality check, Terrence. That cast is fake. The fracture is fake. The surgery is fake. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. But the prison sentence you are about to serve for insurance fraud, grand larceny, and child endangerment, that is going to be very, very real. Terrence sobbed, burying his face in his hands. Get him up, I said to the second deputy. The deputy moved in. He grabbed Terrence by the arm and hauled him out of the chair. Terrence stumbled, putting weight on his fake, broken leg. He didn't cry out in pain. He stood on it firmly, proving to everyone in the room that the injury was a lie. The guests watched in silence as the golden couple was handcuffed in their own living room. The party was over. The hors d'oeuvres were getting cold, and the smell of expensive perfume was replaced by the scent of justice, which smells a lot like fear and sweat. I turned to Kaplan. Evict them, I said. Tonight. Kaplan nodded. Consider it done. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. I had a grandson to pick up from the babysitter. I had a new life to build for him. A life where stairs were solid, where love was real, and where the only thing that was broken was the cycle of lies that had destroyed his parents. The sound of metal ratcheting against bone was the only thing audible in the room as the deputy tightened the handcuffs around Terrence's wrists. It was a cold, mechanical click that signaled the end of my son's freedom and the beginning of his new reality as a felon. He stood there, his weight fully supported by the leg he had sworn was shattered just hours ago, his head hanging low so his chin touched his chest. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. The shame radiating off him was almost palpable, a heavy, suffocating heat that filled the space between us. Megan was not going quietly. As the second deputy moved toward her, pulling her arms behind her back, she began to thrash and scream. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of entitlement. She was a woman who had never been told no in her life, a woman who believed her suburban existence and her expensive highlights inoculated her against consequences. You cannot do this, she shrieked, her face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. Do you know who I am? This is my house. You are trespassing. That old man is lying. He doctored the video. He is setting us up. Sarah, tell them. Tell them he is crazy. She looked desperately toward her best friend Sarah, who was huddled near the bookshelf. Sarah didn't step forward to defend her. She didn't offer a character witness. Instead, she picked up her purse and took a deliberate step backward, putting distance between herself and the woman she had gossiped with for years. Sarah looked at the floor, refusing to meet Megan's eyes. That betrayal hit Megan harder than the handcuffs. Her social circle, the audience she had curated to witness my humiliation, was now the audience for her destruction. The deputy spun Megan around, forcing her to face the room. Ma'am, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit theft. The deputy recited, his voice bored and routine. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. I am not silent, Megan spat, pulling against the restraints. I want my lawyer. I want to press charges against him. She jerked her head toward me. He broke into my house. He stole the deed. He is the criminal. Morris Kaplan stepped forward. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator who has already killed its prey and is now just playing with the carcass. He held up a hand to the deputy, signaling for a moment. Actually, Mrs. Banks Morris, said, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. Mr. Banks did not break into your house. One cannot break into a property one owns. Megan froze. Her eyes darted from Kaplan to me. What are you talking about? We rent this place. We have a landlord. His name is Mr. Henderson. Kaplan smiled. It was a terrifying expression. Mr. Henderson is a property manager, Megan. He manages the property for the holding company. And do you know who owns the holding company? He gestured toward me with an open hand. I own the company, Megan, I said, my voice low and steady. I bought this duplex 3 years ago when your previous landlord filed for eviction because you were 3 months behind on rent. I bought it. I lowered your rent. I froze the payments so you wouldn't be on the street. I have been subsidizing your lifestyle for years while you treated me like a dog in my own home. The color drained from Megan's face so fast I thought she might faint. She looked at the walls of the living room, the walls she had decorated, the walls she thought protected her from the world. They weren't hers. They were mine. You lie, she whispered. You are a broke construction worker. You have a pension and a truck that barely runs. I stepped closer to her. I wanted her to see the eyes of the man she had called dirty. I wanted her to see the intelligence she had mistaken for senility. I am a retired master contractor, Megan, I said. I own this duplex. I own the apartment complex down the street. I own 15 residential buildings in this city. And that construction firm Terrence worked for, the one he got fired from for incompetence. I am the majority shareholder. I signed his severance check. Terrence lifted his head. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a horror that transcended his legal troubles. He croaked. You own Titan Construction. I nodded. I built that company from the ground up, Terrence. I stepped back from operations 5 years ago, but I still own the bricks. I watched you work there for 2 years. I watched you show up late. I watched you cut corners. I watched you treat the laborers like trash because you thought you were better than them. I didn't fire you because you were my son. I let the manager do it because you were a liability. The guests in the room were silent, their mouths agape. They looked at me with new eyes. They didn't see the stained jacket anymore. They saw the power. They saw the empire I had hidden beneath a veneer of humility. They realized they had been mocking a king in his own court. But we are not done, Kaplan interrupted, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a blue folder. He opened it and extracted the loan document Megan had signed just hours earlier. There is the matter of the $40,000 you borrowed today, Morris said. You signed a high-interest loan against a property deed you stole. You committed mortgage fraud. But here is the interesting part. Morris walked over to Megan and held the paper up so she could see her own signature. The lender you borrowed from sold the debt immediately, Morris explained. They sold it to a company called Quick Cash Holdings. And Quick Cash Holdings is wholly owned by Jeremiah Banks. Megan stared at the paper. Her brain was trying to process the impossible geometry of the trap she was in. You borrowed money from me to steal from me, I said. I am your creditor, Megan. I own your debt. And the terms of that loan, which you didn't read because you were too busy counting your chickens, state that upon default or evidence of fraud, the lender has the right to seize all assets of the borrower immediately. I gestured around the room. That means I own your car, I said. I own your furniture. I own that big screen TV you tried to break. I own the jewelry you are wearing. I own everything. You are leaving this house with nothing but the clothes on your back and a pair of handcuffs. Megan's knees finally gave out. The deputy had to hold her up to keep her from collapsing onto the floor. She looked at me, and for the first time the arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a hollow, crushing realization of her own insignificance. She had built her entire identity on being better than me. She had taught my grandson that I was dirty, that I was less than her because of the color of my skin and the calluses on my hands. She believed she was sophisticated and I was simple. She believed she was the queen and I was the peasant. And now she knew the truth. She was a parasite. She was a squatter living in a castle built by the very man she despised. You have millions, she whispered, her voice shaking. You have millions of dollars and you let us struggle. You let us drown in debt. You evil, selfish old man. Why didn't you help us? The audacity of the question almost made me laugh. Even in defeat, she played the victim. I did help you, I roared, my voice echoing off the walls. I put a roof over your head. I paid for Leo's school. I bailed Terrence out of jail when he got that DUI. I fixed your car. I bought your groceries when you claimed you were short. I helped you every single day. But it was never enough, was it? Because you didn't want help. You wanted to consume me. You wanted to pick my bones clean. I leaned in close, my face inches from hers. You called me stupid, Megan. You told my grandson I was dirty. You plotted to put me in a home and drug me until I forgot my own name. You didn't want a father. You wanted a victim. Well, look at me. Do I look like a victim to you? Megan looked away. She couldn't hold my gaze. She looked at the floor, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Get them out of here, I said to the deputies. I can't stand the smell of them anymore. The deputies began to march them toward the door. Terrence was weeping openly now, a broken, sobbing mess. He looked back at me over his shoulder. "Dad," he wailed. "Dad, please. I am sorry. I didn't mean it. She made me do it." I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had eaten pizza while I cried for him. I looked at the man who had let his wife beat him to extort me. "I don't have a son," I said coldly. "My son died the day he decided a pile of money was worth more than his father's life." They were dragged out the front door, their protests fading into the night. The flashing lights of the squad cars illuminated the living room in bursts of red and blue. The guests remained frozen. They were terrified. They were wondering if they were next. They were wondering if they were accomplices. Morris Kaplan snapped his briefcase shut. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the room, "this party is officially over, and since Mr. Banks has just evicted the tenants, I suggest you all leave his property immediately before we start checking ID cards for outstanding warrants." The room cleared in seconds. They scrambled for their purses and their coats, avoiding my eyes, running out the door like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at me. "I didn't know Mr. Banks," she stammered. "I swear. She told me—" I held up a hand. "Go home, Sarah. Just go home." She fled. And then it was just me and Morris standing in the silent living room. The string lights outside were still twinkling. The hors d'oeuvres were still on the tray. The 65-inch TV was still paused on the image of Terrence eating pizza. Morris walked over to the sideboard and picked up the bottle of $80 whiskey. He poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me. "To justice," Morris said, raising his glass. I took the glass. I looked at the amber liquid. I thought about Leo waiting for me at the babysitter's. I thought about the empty house I would go back to. I thought about the war I had just won and the family I had just lost. "To the truth," I said. I drank the whiskey. It burned going down, cleansing the taste of vinegar and betrayal from my mouth. I looked at the TV screen one last time. I picked up the remote and turned it off. The screen went black. The show was over. "What happens now?" Morris asked. "Now," I said, setting the glass down. "Now I go get my grandson. And then I am going to teach him how to build something that lasts, because everything his parents built was made of sand." I walked out of the house, leaving the door open. I didn't care who went in there. There was nothing in that house that mattered anymore. The only thing of value was the boy waiting for me and the future I was going to give him. The fluorescent lights of the county jail holding area hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz that seemed to vibrate right through the concrete floor. It smelled of stale coffee, industrial cleaner, and the sharp, sour scent of human desperation. I stood on the other side of the chain-link partition, my hands resting on the cold metal table. I wasn't there to bail them out. I was there to deliver the final pieces of paperwork for the emergency guardianship of Leo. The social worker had advised me that getting their signatures on a voluntary surrender of custody would speed up the process by months, sparing Leo the trauma of court testimony. Megan sat on the metal bench, her designer dress wrinkled and stained, her mascara smeared into black hollows around her eyes. She didn't look broken. She looked venomous. She looked like a cornered snake waiting for one last strike. Terrence sat beside her head in his hands, rocking slightly back and forth. He looked small. The arrogance of the pizza-eating fraudster was gone, replaced by the trembling fear of a man who had just realized prison isn't like the movies. When Megan saw me, she didn't beg. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She stood up and walked to the partition, her fingers curling around the wire mesh like claws. Her eyes were wide and manic. "You think you won, old man?" she hissed, her voice raspy from hours of screaming at the booking officers. "You think because you have money and lawyers that you beat me. You think you saved your precious legacy." I looked at her calmly. I placed the custody papers on the table. "I am not here to gloat, Megan," I said. "I am here for Leo. Sign the papers. Let him go. You are going to prison for a long time. Don't drag him down with you. Don't make him visit you behind glass for the next 10 years. Give him a chance at a normal life." Megan laughed. It was a dry, jagged sound. A normal life, she mocked. "With you. A senile old bricklayer who thinks he is a king. You want to raise him. You want to turn him into a little version of yourself." She leaned closer to the mesh, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "You are fighting so hard for him, Jeremiah. You are spending thousands on lawyers. You are ready to ruin your own son to protect that boy. It is almost touching. It is almost pathetic." "Sign the papers, Megan," I repeated, sliding them forward. She ignored the papers. She looked at Terrence, who was still staring at the floor. Tell him, Terry, she said. Tell your daddy the truth. Tell him about his precious bloodline. Terrence looked up. His eyes were red and confused. Megan. Stop, he mumbled. Just stop. She spun on him. No, I won't stop. He took everything from us. He humiliated us. He wants the truth. Let's give him the ultimate truth. She turned back to me, her eyes gleaming with hate. You are so proud of your family, aren't you, Jeremiah? You are so proud of your name. Banks. The great Jeremiah Banks. You think Leo is the future of your name. You think he is your flesh and blood. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew what was coming. I had suspected it for years, but hearing it out loud was going to be a different kind of pain. Well, here is the punchline, Megan spat. Leo isn't your grandson. He isn't Terrence's son. He doesn't have a drop of your dirty blood in his veins. Terrence stood up, his face draining of color. Megan, shut up, he shouted. Don't do this. Oh, I am doing it, she screamed over him. He needs to know. Your father needs to know that he is saving a bastard. She looked at me triumphant. Terrence is sterile Jeremiah. He had the mumps when he was 20. We found out a year after we got married. He shoots blanks. He can't have kids. Never could. Terrence sank back onto the bench, burying his face in his hands, again sobbing. The secret he had kept to protect his masculinity was being used as a weapon to destroy his father. So who is the father, Megan? I asked, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was breaking for the innocent boy sleeping at my house. Does it matter? She sneered. Some guy I met at a bar while Terrence was crying about his sperm count, a white guy, by the way. That is why Leo has that skin tone. That is why he is better than you. He isn't yours. He is a stranger. You have been pouring your love and your money into a complete stranger. She laughed again, delighted by the blow she thought she had landed. So go ahead, Jeremiah. Take him. Raise him. Leave him your millions. Leave your empire to a bastard child who isn't even related to you. The joke is on you. You destroyed your real son to save a fake one. She stood back, crossing her arms, waiting for me to crumble. She expected me to rage. She expected me to tear up the custody papers and walk away. She thought that by revealing Leo wasn't my blood, she stripped him of his value to me. She thought she had rendered my sacrifice meaningless. I looked at Terrence. He was weeping, a broken man who had lied to his father for 10 years, who had raised a child he knew wasn't his, and who had let his wife abuse that child because he was too weak to leave her. He had betrayed me for a woman who despised him so much she would reveal his deepest shame to a room full of cops just to hurt me. I looked back at Megan. She was smirking, confident in her victory. Are you done? I asked quietly. Megan blinked, her smile faltering slightly. What? I asked if you are done, I said, because if you are, I have something to show you. I reached into my briefcase. I didn't pull out the custody papers. I pulled out a thick bound document with a blue cover. I slid it under the glass partition. What is this? Megan asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Open it to page 4, I said. She hesitated, then grabbed the document. She flipped the pages. Her eyes scanned the text. She froze. It is a DNA test, I said. Dated 5 years ago. Megan looked up at me, her mouth agape. You knew. I nodded. Of course I knew. I am not blind, Megan, and I am not stupid. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way Terrence acted when Leo was born. He was too nervous, too guilty. And Leo, he didn't look like Terrence. He didn't look like Sarah. I suspected it when he was a toddler. So 5 years ago, when I took Leo for his vaccinations while you were getting your nails done, I had a test run. I compared his markers to mine. 0% probability of relation. Terrence looked up, his face a mask of shock. You knew, Dad. You knew he wasn't mine, and you never said anything. Why would I say anything? I asked, looking at my son. To hurt him. To hurt you. You decided to be his father, Terrence. You signed the birth certificate. That made him yours. And that made him mine. I turned back to Megan. You think blood makes family? I said, my voice rising, filling the holding area. You think DNA is what makes a man love a child? That is why you are empty, Megan. That is why you are soulless. I pointed a finger at her through the mesh. I knew Leo wasn't my biological grandson 5 years ago. And do you know what I did the day I got those results? Megan shook her head, mute. I went to my lawyer, I said, and I set up an irrevocable trust fund for Leo Banks. I put $2 million in it. I secured his future, not because he carried my genes, but because he held my hand when I was sad, because he laughed at my jokes, because he is a good, kind boy who deserved better than the mother he got. I took a step closer to the partition. You thought telling me this would make me abandon him, I said. You thought I was like you. You thought I only valued people who looked like me or belonged to me. But you are wrong. I looked at Terrence. I adopted you, Terrence, I said softly. I chose you. You weren't my blood either. I found you in a system that didn't want you, and I gave you my name. I gave you my home. I loved you more than my own life. Terrence sobbed, his body shaking. And you threw it away, I said, the anger returning. You threw it away for greed. You threw it away for her. I turned back to Megan. So no, Megan, this doesn't hurt me. It liberates me. It proves that Leo is the only innocent person in this entire mess. He is the victim of your lies and your infidelity and your hate. And that makes me love him even more. He is not a bastard. He is my son. He is the son I chose, just like I chose his father before him. I tapped the glass over the custody papers. Now sign the papers I ordered. Sign them and give me my boy. Because if you don't, I will take this DNA test to the judge. I will prove that you committed paternity fraud. I will prove that you have been lying to the court system, and I will make sure you never see the outside of a prison cell again. Megan stared at me. Her weapon had misfired. Her final trump card had burned up in her hand. She looked at Terrence, but he wouldn't look at her. He was broken. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold it. She signed the papers. She shoved them back under the glass. Take him, she whispered, defeated. Take the brat. I took the papers. I checked the signature. It was done. I looked at Terrence one last time. I forgive you for not being my blood son, I said, but I will never forgive you for not being a man. I turned and walked away. The sound of Terrence's weeping echoed down the concrete hallway, a mournful dirge for the family he had destroyed. I walked out into the night air, holding the papers that made me a father again. Leo was waiting, and tomorrow I was going to tell him the truth. Not that he wasn't my grandson, but that he was the only Banks who mattered. 3 months later, the courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old lies. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecutor's table, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I was wearing a new suit this time, navy blue wool tailored to fit the shoulders of a man who no longer had to hide his strength. Beside me sat Morris Kaplan, looking like a hawk perched on a wire ready to dive. On the other side of the aisle sat Terrence and Megan. They looked diminished. The county jail orange jumpsuits washed out their complexions, and the arrogance that had once fueled their cruelty was gone, replaced by a twitchy, desperate fear. The trial had been a grueling week of evidence. The jury had seen the video of the pizza and the rolling pin. They had seen the forged loan documents. They had seen the bank statements showing the thousands of dollars Terrence had stolen over the years. But Megan's defense attorney, a slick man with a smile that looked like an oil spill, was not going down without a fight. He stood up to give his closing argument, buttoning his expensive jacket with a flourish. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The lawyer began walking slowly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. You have seen videos, and you have seen contracts. The prosecution wants you to believe that Megan Banks is a monster. They want you to believe she is a predator who preyed on a helpless old man. But I ask you to look closer. He spun around and pointed a finger directly at me. Look at Jeremiah Banks, he shouted. Does he look helpless to you? Does a man who owns 15 apartment buildings and a construction empire look like a victim? No, he is a predator. He is a man who hoarded millions of dollars while his own son lived paycheck to paycheck. He is a man who watched his family struggle and did nothing. I felt the eyes of the jury shift to me. Some of them looked curious. The lawyer was good. He was twisting the narrative, turning my success into a weapon against me. This was not a robbery. The lawyer continued, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. This was an act of desperation. Megan and Terrence were drowning. They were terrified of losing their home. They were terrified of medical bills. And yes, they made poor choices. Yes, they staged an injury. But why? Because they knew their father, the billionaire miser, would never help them unless he was forced to. This was not greed, ladies and gentlemen. This was survival. Jeremiah Banks entrapped them. He lent them money knowing they would fail just so he could foreclose on them. He set them up to destroy them. He is not a father. He is a loan shark who eats his own young. Megan was sobbing quietly at the defense table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. It was a good performance. I saw a few jurors soften. I saw doubt creeping into their faces. The lawyer was painting me as the villain, a cold, unfeeling tycoon who drove his children to madness. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face like stone. I knew the truth. I knew that I had offered help 1,000 times. I knew that I had paid their rent, their car notes, their tuition. But the jury didn't know the history of every check I wrote. They only saw the rich man and the poor crying woman. The lawyer finished his speech, slamming his hand on the railing. Send a message to this tyrant. Tell him that money cannot buy justice. Find my clients not guilty by reason of duress. He sat down looking satisfied. Megan squeezed his arm, looking up at him with hope. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully played the victim card one last time. But the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Reynolds, stood up. She didn't look worried. She looked like she was holding a royal flush. The defense talks about character, she said, her voice clear and cutting. They talk about desperation. They want you to believe Megan Banks is a loving wife pushed to the brink. Well, we have one more witness who can tell us exactly what kind of character Megan Banks possesses. She turned to the bailiff. The people call LaToya Williams to the stand. A murmur went through the courtroom. Megan's head snapped up. She looked confused. She didn't know LaToya's name. She had never bothered to learn it. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened and LaToya walked in. She was wearing her nurse's uniform, pristine and white, a symbol of care and truth. She walked to the stand with her head held high, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the defendants. She looked like justice personified. She was sworn in. She sat down. Ms. Williams, the prosecutor said, "Where do you work?" "I am the head nurse of the trauma unit at St. Jude's Medical Center," LaToya replied, her voice steady and strong. "And were you on duty the night Terrence Banks was admitted?" "I was." "Did you witness the interaction between the defendants and the victim, Jeremiah Banks?" "I did." "Please tell the jury what you saw." LaToya took a deep breath. She looked at the jury. "I saw a man come in terrified for his son," she said. "I saw him give them his last dollars, and after he left, I saw them laugh." The defense attorney jumped up. "Objection, hearsay," overruled, the judge said. "The witness may describe her observations," LaToya continued. "But that is not all I saw." Later that night, before Mr. Banks returned, I went into the room to check the monitors. Mrs. Banks was on the phone. She didn't see me standing in the doorway. She was talking to someone about her father-in-law. "And what did she say?" the prosecutor asked. LaToya looked directly at Megan. The fear in Megan's eyes was absolute. She remembered now. She remembered the nurse she had ignored, the nurse she had treated like furniture. "She said she couldn't wait until the old man was dead," LaToya said clearly. "She said it was disgusting that she had to touch him. She said she hated the way he smelled. And then she said something I will never forget." "What was that?" "She said it was a cosmic joke that a dirty man like him had money meant for people like her. She used a racial slur to describe him. She said he was nothing but a monkey in a suit, and that she was going to put him in a cage where he belonged." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. It sucked the air out of the room. The jury stared at Megan in horror. The sympathy the defense lawyer had built evaporated in a single second. Megan's face turned a violent shade of red. "You are lying," she shrieked, standing up. "You are just another one of them. You are lying to protect your own kind." "Sit down," the judge roared, banging his gavel. But LaToya wasn't finished. "I am not lying, Mrs. Banks," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "And I brought proof. Hospital policy dictates that we record audio at the nurse's station for liability. You were shouting so loud the hallway microphone picked it up." The prosecutor held up a flash drive. "Your Honor, we would like to submit the audio log from the trauma unit hallway as evidence, Exhibits G." The defense attorney slumped in his chair. He knew it was over. He knew his client had just destroyed herself. The audio was played. It was faint, but distinct. Megan's voice, shrill and hateful, echoed through the silent courtroom. The words were vile. They were the words of a bigot, a racist who hated the very hand that fed her. She mocked my skin color. She mocked my education. She mocked my love for my son. When the tape ended, there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. This wasn't a desperate woman. This was a hateful, greedy monster who had dehumanized her own family to justify stealing from them. Megan sat frozen, her eyes wide, staring at nothing. The mask had been ripped off, and underneath there was nothing but ugliness. Terrence had his head on the table, covering his ears, trying to block out the sound of his wife's voice, the voice that had led him to ruin. The prosecutor looked at the jury. "Desperation does not make you a racist," she said. "Poverty does not make you beat your husband. Greed does that. Hate does that. Find them guilty." The jury didn't even need to leave the room. I could see it in their eyes. They looked at me with respect now, not pity. They saw a man who had endured the unendurable. The deliberation took 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. He didn't look at the defendants. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Megan Banks, guilty on all counts: insurance fraud, grand larceny, elder abuse, conspiracy, and hate crime enhancement. We find the defendant, Terrence Banks, guilty on all counts." The judge adjusted his glasses. He looked down at Megan and Terrence. His face was grim. "You have committed a crime against the very foundation of society," he said. "You betrayed the sacred bond between parent and child. You used racism and violence to exploit a man who gave you everything. There is no mercy in this court for people who prey on their own blood." Megan Banks stand up. Megan stood trembling so hard the table shook. "I sentence you to 10 years in state prison," the judge said, his voice booming like thunder. "You will serve every day, and upon release you are issued a permanent restraining order from Jeremiah Banks and Leo Banks." Megan's knees buckled. She let out a wail that sounded like a siren, but no one moved to help her. Terrence Banks, stand up. Terrence stood. He was crying silent tears. "You are a weak man, Mr. Banks," the judge said. "You let this happen. You participated in the abuse of your own father. I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. Maybe in that time you can learn what it means to be a man." The gavel came down. The sound was final. It was the sound of a door closing on a dark chapter of my life. Deputies moved in to take them away. Megan was screaming, cursing me, cursing the judge, cursing the world. Terrence looked at me one last time. He mouthed the word, "Sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't nod. I just watched them go. They were strangers to me now, just ghosts of a past I was leaving behind. I turned to LaToya, who was still sitting in the witness box. She smiled at me, a small, sad smile of solidarity. "Thank you," I mouthed. She nodded. I walked out of the courtroom. The sun was shining outside, bright and blinding. Morris Kaplan walked beside me silently. "It is done," he said. "Yes," I said, taking a deep breath of fresh air. "It is done. I had my life back. I had my dignity. And most importantly, I had a little boy waiting for me who needed to know that the good guys sometimes win." The autumn leaves were turning a fiery red in the backyard of the new house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a sturdy 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood where kids still played in the street and neighbors waved when you drove by. It was the kind of house I had always wanted to live in, but never felt I could justify while I was hoarding my wealth like a dragon guarding gold. Now the gold was being put to use. I sat on the porch swing, the wood creaking gently under my weight. In my hand I held a letter. The envelope was thin and cheap, stamped with the seal of the state correctional facility. The handwriting on the front was shaky, barely recognizable as the penmanship of the man who used to sign fake contracts with a flourish. Jeremiah Banks, it read. Not Dad, just Jeremiah Banks. I had received one of these every week for the past 6 months. At first they were thick with excuses. Pages and pages of blame shifting. It was Megan's fault. It was the debt. It was the stress. Then they turned into pleas for money, just a little for the commissary, just a little for a better lawyer. This one was thin, maybe a single page. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about the boy I had raised. I thought about the fishing trips, the graduation ceremonies, the pride I had felt when he got his first job. I tried to find that feeling again, that warmth in my chest, but it was gone. It had been replaced by the cold memory of him eating pizza while I wept for his pain. It had been erased by the image of him letting his wife beat him to steal from me. Forgiveness is a virtue, the preacher says, but forgiveness without repentance is just permission to be hurt again. And Terrence hadn't repented. He had just gotten caught. I didn't open the letter. I stood up and walked to the fire pit I had built in the center of the patio. I had been burning leaves earlier and the embers were still glowing hot under the ash. I held the envelope over the heat. The paper curled, browning at the edges. Then it caught. A small blue flame licked at the corner, devouring the stamp, then the return address, then my name. I watched it burn until it was nothing but black flakes floating on the wind. I didn't feel sad, I didn't feel angry, I felt clean. I felt like I had finally swept the last of the dust out of my house. Grandpa, a voice called out from the back door. "Are you ready?" I turned. Leo was standing there holding a baseball glove in one hand and a ball in the other. He had grown 2 inches in the last 6 months. His shoulders were broader, his stance more confident. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by the bright, clear gaze of a boy who knows he is safe. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had a smudge of dirt on the front. He looked like a kid. I smiled. "I am always ready, little man." I walked over to him, my boots crunching on the gravel. I took the glove he offered me. It was stiff leather, still new. We were breaking it in together. "Did you get the mail?" Leo asked, looking at the fire pit. "Just some junk," I said. "Nothing important." Leo looked at the ashes, then up at me. He knew. He was smart. He knew his father wrote to me. He knew I never wrote back, and he never asked why. He understood in his own 10-year-old way that some bridges are burned for a reason. "Okay," he said, shrugging. "Do you think I can hit the curveball today? I think if you keep your eye on the ball, you can hit anything," I said. We walked out onto the grass. The sun was warm on my face. I pitched the ball gently. Leo swung. The bat connected with a satisfying crack. The ball sailed over the fence, landing in the neighbor's yard. "Whoa," I laughed. "Easy there, slugger. I don't own that house yet." Leo grinned. A real wide grin that showed all his teeth. It was the best thing I had ever built. Better than any skyscraper. Better than any apartment complex. I had rebuilt a broken boy. Over the last 6 months, we had done a lot of rebuilding. We had therapy sessions where Leo learned that the words his mother said were lies. We had long talks on the porch where I told him stories about my grandfather, the man who bought the land that saved us. I told him about our history, about the strength in his blood, about the men and women who had survived worse than Megan Banks so that he could stand here today. He wasn't scrubbing his skin anymore. He was wearing it like armor. We played catch until the sun started to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Grandpa Leo said, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, son." "Why did you keep the old truck?" he asked, pointing to the driveway where my rusted Ford was parked next to a brand new luxury sedan I had bought for long trips. "You have so much money now. You could buy a fleet of trucks." I looked at the old Ford. It was ugly. It was loud. It leaked oil. But it had never failed to start. It had carried me to job sites for 20 years. It had carried the materials to build my empire. "I kept it to remember," I said. "Remember what?" "Remember that it doesn't matter what something looks like on the outside," I said, walking over to him. "It matters what is under the hood. That truck looks like junk to most people, but it has an engine that could pull a house down." I put my hand on his shoulder. "People judged me by that truck, Leo. Your mother judged me. She thought because I drove a wreck, I was a wreck. She didn't look under the hood. She didn't see the value." Leo nodded slowly, like a book cover. "Exactly," I said. "Never judge a book by its cover, and never judge a man by his boots. Value is what you carry inside you. It is your integrity. It is your strength. It is your loyalty. Those are things you can't buy, and those are things nobody can steal from you." Leo looked at me, his eyes serious. "I want to be like that," he said. "I want to be like the truck." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "You already are, kid. You are tougher than I ever was at your age." "Come on," I said, putting my arm around him. "Let's go inside. I think I smell dinner." We walked back toward the house. The lights were on inside, warm and inviting. It was just the two of us, but the house didn't feel empty. It felt full. It felt complete. I had lost a son, but I had gained a future. I had been betrayed by the past, but I was building a new legacy. And this time I wasn't building it with bricks and mortar. I was building it with truth. As we stepped onto the porch, I looked back at the street. It was quiet. No police cars, no screaming women, no fake tears, just the peace of a life well earned and a battle well fought. I opened the door and let Leo walk in first. "Welcome home, son," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The door closed behind us, shutting out the world, shutting out the lies, and leaving only the two of us in the house that truth built. They looked at my rusted truck and saw junk. They looked at my calloused hands and saw poverty. But they never bothered to look under the hood. That was their fatal mistake. Real value isn't about the shine on the surface. It is about the engine underneath. It is your integrity, your loyalty, and the strength of the foundation you build. My son chased the appearance of wealth and lost his soul. I stuck to the concrete truth and gained a future. Never let anyone define your worth by the clothes on your back. Build your life on solid ground, and no storm can ever knock you down. If you believe that family is defined by loyalty and not just blood, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments below, have you ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to save your peace? I read every single one.